welcome everyone to Town of Hilton Head Finance Administrative Committee meeting. Are there any changes to today's agenda?
Move adoption is written.
Thank you. I'll get a second, Mr. Ames, to adopt the agenda, sir. Second. Thank you. All in favor? Minutes have been provided from our November 14th regular scheduled meeting.
Move adoption is written.
Second. All in favor? Next item we have is appearance by citizens. We've got 3 agenda items today, and as always, we are more than happy to see so many people in attendance that want to speak. But in the essence of time and us handling the business before us, I'd ask that if you have signed up to speak and your comments are related to one of the agenda items, that you wait until that agenda item, because there will be more than enough time for you all to express your opinions at that point. So with that being said, I will ask Kim to call the roll of folks that have signed up to speak. And it is up to you if you want to speak now on an agenda item on an item that is not on today's agenda. And if you want to take the opportunity when we arrive at the 3 items before us to speak then. All yours, Kim.
Sandra Espinoza.
Is this? Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sandra Espinoza. I have lived in Hilton Head for more than 20 years. I raised my family in here, and I had see how this beautiful island grow up and progress. I am here because thanks to Habitat for Humanity, I was able to have and select to my house. This is a program that helps families like mine to have a home at an affordable price. I ask to you to allow us to have our house here on the island. Many of us working in here pay our taxes and help the community in general, different kinds of programs. Allow us to continue and be part to the island. So please thinking about our families, our community. Thank you so much. Have a nice day.
Thank you.
Bonnie Canova. Wait.
Wait, thank you.
Lynn Fontaine.
You called really?
No.
Okay.
Lynn Fontaine. Saldan Lee. Kenneth Campbell. Lee Lucifer. Megan Fitzpatrick. Matthew Stock.
Wait, please.
Lynn Greeley.
I'm gonna pass 2 more of these.
Thank you.
Skip Hoagland, Windmill Harbor. In order for town and county councils and their employees to protect and monitor town and county resources, it's essential all operations be reviewed and analyzed independently and constantly. The most effective way to begin and maintain such a process is to form a community-based forensic audit committee. One of its primary tasks would be to ask critical questions of the senior staff, the managers, and the lawyers. The reason for asking the questions is to determine quickly and easily whether policies and practices are protecting and maximizing resources effectively, and they are free from the ravages of potential and actual corruption. Fortunately, a trend toward the establishment of groups akin to forensic audit committees, FACTS, seems to be gaining momentum, as well as internal forensic audits. The reality is that some degree of corruption is likely to be found in most schools, town and county governments. However, it takes critical questioning and diligent forensic review and analysis to determine whether the corrupt acts have taken place, are taking place, or could be committed with relative ease. In this regard, it's vital to understand what is meant by the term corruption: breach of trust, bribery, deceit, deception, extortion, fraud, graft, malfeasance, nepotism, payoff, profiteering, etc. Typically, schools, treasurers, and town and county employees and many council members will be defensive, and they deny that corruption is a malignant, institutionalized problem and will provide reason that should not be accepted. They say accounts are audited regularly, so there's no reason to be concerned about or suspect any wrongdoing. Although it appears to be a very credible answer, it does not withstand verification because routine audits are not designed to uncover the three categories of corruption: cheating, deceit, waste, mismanagement, fraud, and stealing. Only a forensic audit can accomplish this. If an audit were conducted with generally accepted auditing standards, GAS, and therefore incorporated Standard Form 99, consideration of fraud in a financial statement audit, it still would not identify the waste, the mismanagement, or crimes. The two major problems facing taxpayer advocates are how to discover waste and corruption, how to prove corruption to the public, and only when corruption can be proven with practices and procedures be put in place to limit its cancerous impact and resources. I have a manual to hand you all later that will provide information, tools, and techniques that will assist you and all taxpayers in this critical endeavor. Remember, the Reagan principle, the three best words that has ever been spoken, in my opinion: trust but verify. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Skip Hoagland.
Alex, you approved my POA to speak 3 minutes for another person. It turned out that you were right and Mr. Perry, our untruthful mayor, and town lawyers were wrong. I won the POA case with Judge Vaughs, who ruled in my favor. Alex, I will turn my back on you and others on this finance committee today. In fact, I can no longer face you or the entire town council in the future, since you have decided to violate many laws, especially the approving of illegal tax issue to the chamber and many nonprofits that are also using millions of our tax monies illegally. Alex, you, like me and many others on this council and finance committee, are not CPAs, and we're really not qualified to be a chairman of a finance committee. And if you were, you would not be allowing all this tax theft and fraudulent budgets and audits by our town managers, CPA, and lawyers. Even the legal fees are buried in administrative expenses, including all the chamber DMO use of tax funds, its fraud, its scams, and its tax evasion hidden by Bill Miles and assisted by Mark Orlando and the CPA Troyer. Also, Alex, as finance chairman, if you were honest, you would have asked Alan Perry why he lied and said he saw 80% of all the chamber accounting with Bill Miles on the chamber CPA Ray deal. Plus, you would not allow the chamber to own the ATAX-funded DMO website, HiltonHeadIsland.org, versus the town and taxpayers' ownership. And worse, allow Bill Miles to sell advertising on this website and secretly launder and pocket the profits to pay his $500,000 or $600,000 annual pay package. Former FBI agents that I hire told me it's not possible for Bill Miles to make that kind of money being a nonprofit chamber employee. So I'm going to turn my back today. And the bottom line, folks, and the fact is, since our entire finance committee and ATAX committee and town council and all town employees keep voting to allow the tax theft, and it has become an illegal, non-functioning local government, I will face taxpayers who these people serve, and we pay their salaries to be honest. I will only face this council again when they comply to all the laws, not just the ones they want to comply to, but every law that we identify. They must comply, they must be transparent, they must be held accountable. And when they do that, I will turn around and I will show them respect, but not until they become a legal, functioning council, and I hope you all appreciate that, and I hope you all agree with me on that. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Hoagland.
Susan, where's Vicky?
I'm gonna wait.
Sherry Mickret? Okay, John Smarsley?
I'll wait.
Ashley Phillips?
I'll wait.
And Matthew Sweeney?
I'll wait.
That's all I have on my list.
Thank you. We'll move on. Our next order of business is a 2024 fiscal update from our interim finance director, Mr. Jeff Harriman. Welcome, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm happy to provide the financial update for the 4 months ending October 31st, 2023. The presentation I'm going to provide today is a little different format than what John Troyer used to present over the past several years. The presentation John was giving was really a result of COVID-19, and to ensure that the Finance and Administrative Committee was informed of the financial condition of the town. John continued on with his presentation for the last several years, but John and I talked before he retired, and we wanted to change the presentation going forward to be more in line with the monthly financial statements that we email out to town council each month and also post to the town's website. Let's see here. So everything that's in my presentation today is really coming from that financial statement that we emailed out to you each month. The other change that we've made is in the past, John was also trying to provide as up-to-date information as he could. So like right now, he would be giving you some preliminary November information. But at this point, we have not actually finished closing November yet. And I know many times he would say, well, there's still additional items that need to be posted. So what we wanted to do going forward is wait till we actually had emailed you the package, and then we'll discuss, just present that information. So that's why we're going through October 31st presentation right now. So anyway, the key issues, and these are similar each year, is the initial months of each fiscal year are traditionally low collections on the revenue side. Expenditures, which are primarily personnel related, are incurred more evenly throughout the year. A temporary deficit is the norm for the first 4 months of the fiscal year, and the estimated revenues used to craft the budget are still expected to support the budget as passed. And the town is operating within the budget expectations for this time of the year, except for the 4 land purchases, which will require a budget amendment. Oops. All right. So this slide is our general fund, and this is just the revenues and transfers in, and it's comparing the budget versus year to date. And you can see, if you look at the subtotal line, which is 43.6 million, you can see year to date we've collected 8.1 million, so we've only collected 19% of our revenue, even though we're 33% way through the year, 4 months, so 33%. And the big variance you can see is the very first line, real and personal property taxes. We budgeted 16.9 million. We've only collected a little over 300,000, so only 2% of the revenue. So again, this is expected, but just to show you where we are at this point. This slide compares 2024 to 2023. The one you can see so far, we're at 8.1 million. Year to date through last year, we were at almost 6.3 million. The big variance is in business licenses, the second line. And that's really a timing issue. We collect the Municipal Association of South Carolina provides us with business license fees for insurance brokers that they collect throughout the state. And it's just a timing difference there, that because we collected this in the first 4 months this year, and actually in 2022, they actually gave us the money early. We got it in June of 2022, so it was recorded actually back in 2022. So 2023, there was not any broker fees recorded. Okay, slide is the general fund, this expenditures and transfers out, comparing the budget versus year-to-date. And again, if you look down at the bottom, you can see we're at 33% total, which, like I said, is what we're 33% through the year. Now, the big thing there, though, is the transfers out. You can see we've already transferred out the total budget of $2 million to housing and $2 million to sale of land, which is used for land acquisition. So really, we're on our other expenses, we're actually under budget if you look at it just at a straight line basis. This slide is comparing the expenditures year-to-date versus year-to-date 2023. And at this point, we're showing that we're 5.4 million ahead of expenditures compared to 2023. But again, 3 million of that was related to the housing and to the transfers for the land acquisition. But again, based on, this variance is expected based on the 2024 budget plan, we expected to see this kind of variance. And then this, just a quick summary of the general fund activity, revenues, expenditures, and the net, in this case, net revenues under expenditures. And even though there's a variance of a little over 3 million, if you take out the transfers for the housing and for the land acquisition, you can see we're almost basically at the same point as where we were at this point last year. This slide is just a summary of the different categories of the capital projects fund. The big thing you can see there is land acquisition. And again, that's always done with town council, does not budget for land acquisition. They always do a budget amendment based on the purchases. So you can see that variance is of a little over 11 million, and a budget amendment will be forthcoming for that. And this is just a quick slide showing the 4 land acquisitions, the purchase price of the 4 land acquisitions that have been done in FY24. This next section, really this last section here, is just our charts. And if you remember from our monthly package that we send out, we show the different revenue, the major revenue categories, and we show all 12 months for the last 10 years. But for this presentation, just so you can get a feel for where we are year to date compared to prior years, we've just shown the four months. And again, this is the property tax one, and the budget again is 6.9 million. So at this point, this doesn't really show a lot, but again, just is a format that we're going to use. And then for each one of these slides, this is exactly the same graph that shows up in your presentation. And it's just a way you can see the column on the left is the actual for each year, and then the column on the right for each year is the budget. So you can just kind of get a feel for where we are right now, where we expect to end the year. This one is the business license, and as I just talked about, you can see in 2023 that the amount is only $545,000. So again, just the way we received the money in 21, 22, and 24 was a little different from 2020, 23. And again, same thing, just the same graph there. The next one is the EMS revenues. Again, you can see we're almost exactly where we were in 2023, year to date. Local A-tax revenue, you can see after 4 months, this is actually the highest local A-tax revenue we've had in the past 10 years. Real estate transfer fees, you can see that it is down, but as John, I know, had described in the past, 2021 and 2022 were both exceptional years. Even last year was a very strong year. And this year, we're still going very strong through the first 4 months. The hospitality tax revenue, this is actually through 4 months is the highest we've had through 4 months. Beach preservation, same thing, the highest revenue we've had through the first 4 months. That is all I had. So if there were any questions, I hope this format provides you with the information that you were looking for.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You're ready this time. Go ahead.
One item on there that I have a peculiar interest in, which is the council. Note that the percentage of amount expended to date is a good deal higher. Is there timing differences? Are my colleagues getting a lot more money than I thought they were?
I will have to look into that, and I'm happy to.
There are a number of items in there other than direct council
Yes,
expenditures,
there
are
is,
there not?
yes, yes. So yes, I'll look into that, and I'll get back to you on that.
Thank you. Mr. Stanford.
Thank you for your report. Very interesting data. I'll have to get adjusted to your new format because I was used to the other format. But I always look at the big variances. There's a big variance in public safety. Is that because we're not setting aside funds for public safety at this point?
I think the public safety was the way we were recording the fees that we're paying to, or the accruing the amount for the police services with Beaufort County. Before, we were showing that, I think, under public safety. I think in the budget this year, we were showing it, I think it's under town-wide. So it's just a difference of how we presented it in '23 versus how we're showing it in '24.
So the set aside the accrual is still there.
Yes.
It just appears in a different place.
Correct, exactly.
In the overall
Correct.
report. Investment income was way up. That's a good thing. What are the nuts and bolts of that?
Investment income is way up. Yes, we've actually, year-to-date, investment income is 4.5 million, which is already, last year, we were, I believe, at 5.8 million. So already through 4 months, it's the second highest the town has ever had. So we invest with the South Carolina Local Government Investment Pool. Sorry, I don't have it right in front of me, but I believe it's around 46 million we have with that. The interest rate's a little over 5% we get on that funds. And then we do use Wells Fargo security. We purchase treasury bills, treasury notes, and agency securities. So combined, we have almost 200 million invested that's as of the end of November.
So the big increase in the income there is because we made shrewd investments?
Yes, over time, something John had started and Jim Alm, who was the accounting manager before me, had started investing with the local government investment pool. And then we eventually got to the point that because of the investments we had, we engaged with Wells Fargo Securities and started purchasing treasury notes and treasury bills.
Good. I'm glad to see prudent investments.
Yes.
Thank you for your report.
Thank you.
James.
Thank you, Chair. Jeff, appreciate the time. Question about ATAX, and you may not have the answer today. If you could provide it maybe next month, I would appreciate it. ATAX is based on the number of tourists who come through the island and also the room rates of the accommodations. I'd be interested in knowing how those two and what ratio they are in contributing to that increase in accommodations tax.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Everybody good? Thank you for your time. Thank you for the new format. And if you get our next meeting, report back on the questions from Councilman Alfred and Councilman Ames, that'd be greatly appreciated. Okay. Any public comment on this particular item?
Thank you.
Is that a yes, Mr. Holtman? Please.
Did everybody understand what we just saw? Everybody understand all that? Well, if you're not a CPA, I can promise you didn't. In fact, if you weren't a forensic auditor, you didn't. Again, the legal fees were buried and exceed much larger cities reported by the Island Packet. How does our legal fees get beyond Charleston and Myrtle Beach? How is that possible? Accommodation taxes and hospitality taxes are two of the largest sources of income. They have disappeared and unaccounted for. How did that happen? This council must take back control of all budgets and audits from the town employees and hire an out-of-state accounting firm that specializes in government forensic audits. This will help to restore the trust and the faith in our government. We don't have that. Everybody in this room knows I'm right. They just don't want to stand up here and talk about it. They don't want to take the bullet like I do. I understand that. We have to restore trust, accountability, faith, and there's only one way. It's forensic audits. We have already caught these people, not just in the town of Hilton Head. I'm not blaming just them. It's in the town of Bluffton. It's in the Beaufort County. It's in Beaufort, the city of Beaufort. The entire Beaufort County has become a cesspool. It's not a swamp. It's become a cesspool of incestuous, backslapping, backroom dealing corruption, and we got to clean it up. And there's only one way. It's a way I'm sharing with you. It's forensic audits. It's restore the Reagan principle. Once we do that, we can take back and see where our money's going. This is our hard-earned money. This is our tax money. Do we want people to steal our tax money? Is that what y'all want? No, we don't want that. Times are hard. Wake up, stand up, speak up. Thank you.
Okay, we will move on to our next agenda item, which is consideration of a memorandum of understanding with University of South Carolina, inclusive of the Island Ambassador Program. Good day, Mr. Gruber.
Good day, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Get myself situated here. For the benefit of the audience, just want to kind of cover briefly some history here before we dive into our continuing discussions in this matter. The town has had a long-standing partnership with the University of South Carolina Beaufort, particularly to support tourism and other associated activities here on the island. Included in your packet today is some memorandums that go back a number of years. That ultimately culminated in the town putting language within its local code that set aside 5% of its local accommodations taxes for the purpose of supporting this particular function on the island in partnership with the university. This past year, due to increases in the collections in both state and local aid tax, council requested that we go in and we look at removing that language and put it on an annual budget basis as compared to just a straight mathematical calculation based upon collections. In doing that, we're hoping to incorporate the university as part of our annual affiliated agency program. And with most of those affiliated agencies, we like to have a memorandum of understanding in place that outlines how that money will be received, how it will be used, how it will be tracked, accounted, and reported on. And so that brings us kind of up to date on where we are now. At the last meeting, the comments we received from council included a number of things. One, it was for inclusion of a look back into the prior funding levels for the university. So I want to highlight that in the memorandum, we have listed here this most recent year at $238,985. The year before that was $190,094. In FY22, it was $186,367. And then in FY 2021, it was $184,522. And just as a reminder, the requested amount of funding from the university is $235,000 going forward with an annual inflation adjustment of 3% per year. One of the things that we're going to get into today is a deeper dive into that funding request and look at the budget amounts. And we've got representatives from the university that are here today to go over that. Additionally, what was requested at the last meeting was we do a little bit more in-depth analysis of the services that are going to be provided, how those services line up with the town's strategic plan, how they're going to be measured in terms of success, and then how that information is going to ultimately be reported to us. So they've brought with them some information I'm going to provide to you, and then I'm going to put it up here on the big screen in just a minute. Let me first cover the historical funding levels. The amounts identified in the staff memo indicate the amounts that were approved as part of the budget. However, we've always proceeded with the university on a reimbursement basis. So they submit us invoices showing the actual expenses for the programming, and then we pay out on those invoices up to the budgeted amount that's been approved in the fiscal budget. So what this shows you here is the actual amounts that were budgeted and then the actual amounts that were reimbursed over the last 4 years to kind of coincide with that time. Obviously understanding that this figure right here at the end is only for a partial year and we're still within the middle of that fiscal year. But otherwise it shows you kind of what those historical amounts have been. And I believe the representatives from the university are going to go a little bit deeper into that and talk about how they've previously done budgeting with the Center for Low Country Tourism and how they're going to do that differently going forward in the future. I also want to pull up and show, these are the handout materials that I provided to you just now. And we'll give, there we go. So one of the things to highlight, the Center for Low Country Hospitality Education, that is the entity with which we would be contracting with. So it's provided by the university. The university supports that, but it is separate and distinct from the greater university itself. So I know I mentioned in the staff report at the last meeting, there was some request for information regarding the general health of the university itself, the student programming, things like that. In discussions with representatives from the university, they are very willing to come forward and present that information because it is all publicly available. However, they do want to draw a distinction between the greater university itself and the Center for Low Country Hospitality Education. So we've not included anything in the draft memorandum of understanding other than including a commitment by them that they would come as requested on a periodic basis to provide that information, but to keep it separate and apart from the contract or the MOU with the center. And you know what, rather than covering this material myself, why don't I invite them up here and they can go over it with you? Yes, sir.
Mr. Group, before you go, can you just flip back to, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Not able to take a note here very quickly. Okay, any questions from Mr. Group before we have representative from USCB? Okay, thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you for allowing us to present on this today. One of the things that I want to be able to talk about is the packet that you have in front of you talks about some of the things that we have done and are doing with the center at this point in time. I want to make sure that you're aware of some very important information here in terms of what we have been able to accomplish. Sarah Beachkovsky has joined the university as of August 1st. And so in that time, she's really done a lot of work on revising the Island Ambassador program, making it a more vibrant and relevant program. We have already certified almost as many ambassadors in these 4 months than we did in the previous year. So we have really stepped up our game in terms of that. And so I'm very appreciative of the work that she has done. She's really met with multiple constituents to make sure that that happens. And we're working further on some other initiatives with that. The Island Ambassador is the biggest part of the budget allocations for the center. And one of the things that we're looking at is also the quality management program. And the quality management program is being revamped as well. And that is going to be very helpful, I think, in terms of providing feedback to our local tourism industries to find out what works, what makes tourists happy, what doesn't, and how they can work on doing that. So it's really a continuous quality improvement type of project that we're working on. I know that also at the last meeting, there were some questions about metrics and how we intend to measure what we're doing. And so in your packets as well, you will see that there is an assessment plan in here that I think is much more detailed than you've ever had before. This way we will, oh, thank you. I apologize.
No worries.
And so in here, you will see that we have really taken a look at what we're doing, identifying some very clear objectives related to that and how that ties back to the town's strategic action plan, because this is something that we all want to be able to do. And so you will see in here that we have identified some things. We're doing some new programming related to identifying junior ambassadors. We're going to develop a primary, a customized Island Ambassador program for primary Spanish speakers. For example, we're going to also offer an advanced Island Ambassador program. And so Sarah's been gathering information on what that would look like. So we can really tailor our program much more than we have in the past. So that's what we're moving forward with here. Quality management, we're going to, it's largely been related to restaurants, so we're going to be expanding that to some other area industries, lodging, recreation, so we're working with local vendors on that. The other thing that we want to be able to do is offer continuing education related to industry certifications that are important for the hospitality and tourism industry. And so we are looking at getting those situated, being able to offer those on the Hilton Head Island campus for the region so that it can benefit the region. And I think the last item here is the proposed budget. And one of the things that I want to be able to point out is that in past years, the budget had personnel kind of folded in operations. It wasn't quite clear, and so we have separated that out. Personnel are involved in the design, delivery, and evaluation of the Island Ambassador Program, the Quality Management Program, providing those reports, meeting with individuals. And we have parsed out in the past a lot of this work, and we are regrouping and recentering that back into the center so that it's not parsed out among different areas of the university. And so we have really taken a look at what is really personnel related, which is the largest part of the budget. And the other piece is the operations here, and that is to provide for technology, marketing. For example, how do we get the Island Ambassador information out there, printing and supplies and things like that. And so that's where you come up with that $235,000 that's been requested. So what questions do you have for me?
Thank you for the presentation. We'll start with you this time, Mr. Stanford.
Thank you. Thank you for your report. I, for one, am proud of the Ambassador Program and want to see it continue. But you've raised some questions here. First of all, the Center for Low Country Hospitality Education, we're being told, is not the university.
The center, I'm responsible for overseeing every center, and they are separate. So what happens with the center is that we actually work through Hilton Head Island is a grantor. And it works through our grants office and in Columbia. And so the budget is completely separate. This is not mixed with any funding to support any sort of university operations. The entire 100% of the ask is for the delivery of the products that we have said that we will deliver.
I understand and appreciate that, but I want to know that we're dealing with a university in this program. You can have an entirely separate entity out there, and I'm not prepared to deal with an entirely separate entity. Rather, I want to be dealing with the university. Under the umbrella of the university, if that's where this center stands,
That's correct.
I'm okay.
Yes.
So I think it's important to clarify that so that everyone understands, including me. So thank you. We have talked to you about metrics. You have talked about the number of employees. You've talked about the programs. You haven't spoken about the number of contacts made in the public. You have not spoken about the number of students involved in the programs. It's important for us to understand that so that we can move forward.
I'm not understanding your question exactly. Students in terms of?
How many students are involved?
In the center?
Yes.
Okay. Our students are involved in any number of activities. They're not employed by the center per se. Our students are a very integral part of our quality management program, and that is tied to a curricular outcome for the students. And so they are very involved in that on a day-to-day basis.
But in terms of a measure, what I'm asking is how many of those students are there involved in this program, and how much are they involved in it? Do you follow that? You say your students are involved. How many students? My basic concern here comes from the fact that we see very little student activity over here on the Hilton Head campus. We want to promote and encourage that, and your program is a big part of that,
Right.
trying to promote it. And so The measure that I'm looking for is how many students are going to be involved and how many public comments are going to be made. For example, you talked about in the previous meeting that we had about the secret shopper program. How often does that happen? How many stores are contacted? What is the result of that? Those are the types of metrics that would be useful to us to understand that our money, our public money, is being put to the proper purpose.
I appreciate that. I want to refer you back to the assessment plan that is included in your packet. And in that assessment plan, we talk about the number of classes that we're providing. We're looking at the number of quality management assessments, and they're pretty detailed assessments that occur. Our students are largely responsible for that, and we collate that data and provide that. We meet with the individual entities related to that. And so we have, those are pieces that are in here. What is not in this assessment plan is the number of students that are involved, but I can tell you that the courses run, that this is tied to, is run twice a year, and there are about 25 students in each course, each semester. So that's about 50 students annually that are participating in this quality management program.
I would like to see that as part of your report, is all I'm saying. As we're
Okay.
moving forward.
Absolutely,
when
we
you're
can certainly
reporting
do
on this,
that.
get into those more granular details, if you will. That'll help us in understanding and assessing the success of the program. So thank you for your presentation.
Sure.
That's it, Mr. Stanford.
Yes.
Mr. Alfred.
Following up on the question of Mr. Stanford about who we are dealing with, I assume that the center employees are all on the payroll of the university.
So the employees are paid through the funds that are provided here. So they deliver the programming. The salary is distributed by the university.
University employees.
Yes, they receive university benefits, et cetera. Yes.
You also mentioned you have a similar program for other jurisdictions around the state. Correct?
No,
One?
correct. I deal with other centers, but none related to hospitality and tourism. I deal with other centers within the university, but none other are related to hospitality and tourism. Okay.
Steves.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a couple of points, and I must say that I follow up on the other questions that have been raised. Hospitality enhancement is certainly in the best interest of the town, so we are in partnership there, so that makes sense to me. I think we want, as a council, to verify the value of the program and somehow measure progress. So just one simple idea, let's not just measure or survey the students, let's go to the employers and ask them what value was created by their employees being in the program.
That question has been added to our assessment, and so we've asked the employees themselves how that has benefited them, and the next step will be to go back in a few months and see, as a follow-up, how much they've used that information, for example.
I'm being very specific, asking the employers, because I want to hear that the businesses say this is important to hospitality in the community and to business.
Well, I certainly we can certainly gather whatever information it is that you would like to have. I will say that we have been inundated with requests and phone calls to be able to deliver the Island Ambassador Program. We have hit up some new organizations, I think.
Yeah,
Right.
I believe you're doing the work that needs to be done. I'm just looking for a record of it so that each
Sure.
year we can evaluate.
Absolutely, certainly, we can absolutely provide that information.
And how many FTE are incorporated in the $205,000?
That is 2.5 FTEs total. 2 full-time folks and part of the Sharing Shack is a temporary, that's our recycling program at the beach, and that is a 13-week program that occurs over the summer months. And so that totals to about 2.5 FTEs total. So one of the things that we identified in previous budgets is that consultants and their associated fees are really personnel, and they were kind of folded in a little bit differently. So we felt it was very important to be transparent and let you know exactly what personnel costs are for the program.
Does that mean that the 2 FTE on the list is really 1/2?
Excuse me?
Mistake here on the, under.
Hold on one second, Mr. Alfred. I don't want to lose your train of thought, Mr. Ames. I've got the same concern, but we'll circle back to that.
Okay.
I was just going to summarize by saying I'm on board with the partnership, but I'm also interested in confirming value and charting progress.
Absolutely.
Well, I think what Mr. Alfred is asking is, in your notes on your proposed budget here, as we're reading this, it states 1 full-time employee as the director, 1 full-time employee as a data analysis person.
Right.
Then 2 full-time employees.
For 13 weeks.
Okay,
so
it's
that's-
really a part-time.
So, correct, it's only for part of the year.
In effect, it's 1/2 instead of 2.
Correct. There's two people that will be operating that, but it will total 1/2 of an FTE.
Got it.
Okay. Clear, Mr. Alfred?
Thank you.
Okay. I concur with the discussion around metrics. When we look at this opportunity, it's really keenly focused on our business providers here on Hilton Head and them keeping our level of service at a certain point. So understanding from them how they feel about the return on the investment, I think is ideal, because if business is growing, then there's not a whole lot of reason for us to be discussing, how much money we're pushing out to this. But I am going to touch on a slightly different subject here. And Mr. Gruber, during his original presentation, touched on the fact that we changed the code so that we were not allocating that 5% of the ATAX every year. And the current MOU as drafted is asking for this $235,000 with I think it was a 3% increase for the next 5 years, right? So I think as a council, we're struggling with that a bit, because as you take the look back over the last 3 years, the total expenditures are under 200K, right? I think what we need to do here is ask the university if we can remove that actual amount from the MOU, okay? And as you apply as affiliated agency, you apply with your budgetary request at that point versus baking it into the MOU.
And I appreciate that. I think one of the concerns that I have is the uncertainty of funding and not knowing and planning, being able to plan ahead. So there's not really an opportunity to make much progress if we're not sure what the next fiscal year is going to look like, and if it's even remotely going to resemble the previous fiscal year. So we were looking for stability in funding.
Absolutely. And we appreciate that we have the same concerns as we go through our budgetary process, right? Not knowing what the funding is going to look like year after year. I think that's still a question point for us.
It could be a 2-year commitment rather than a 5-year commitment.
Could be. Did you have a point, Mr. Stamper?
No, I'm agreeing with you, Mr. Chairman, that we're trying to move this into the affiliated agency realm, which is something that we work with all the time. Sympathetic with your concerns about planning, but we have to manage these funds, and we have a lot of people that are asking for these funds for worthy causes. I support continuation of your program. I don't support locking the town into a specific dollar amount, however.
I appreciate that. I will say that I think that presents a challenge for us to not have certainty in funding, to be able to make commitments long-term for how this program would be delivered. You know, we will not be able to, we have provided unlimited Island Ambassador programs in the past. I don't know that we will be able to continue to do that if we don't have some sort of stable funding model. And that is part of the concern and why this was approached in this manner.
Are you suggesting that you make plans on a 3 or a 5 year basis?
We've never been able to do that before because of the previous funding model. What we'd like to be able to do is to be able to say 3 years out, what can we do? What do we expect to be able to accomplish? With a stabilized funding model, we would be able to do that. Historically, we have not, because historically, we have not had any consistency.
You'd be able to do it in the early years, but of a 5 year period, but not in the later.
I guess I'm a little confused because before we changed the code, this program was automatically allocated a percentage of our ATAX collections every year since its conception.
And that changed, that code has changed.
Last year, yes.
Okay. And so with that, that brings a great deal of uncertainty from my perspective. And so that is the reason for looking at this. If we want to be able to continue to support the training and the hospitality and tourism industry here, we need to have stable funding to be able to do that.
So the variable is the term of the contract, and I would suggest that we just modify the term of the contract.
Yes, Mr. Ames is suggesting that we reduce the term of the contract from 5 years to 2 years to give some certainty to USCB and also give council an opportunity to review these new metric opportunities that we have.
I think that goes a long way to meeting the town's needs and hopefully to meeting the university's needs so that we would be kind of on a 2 year rolling sort of basis. That way you would have some predictability.
That's acceptable.
However, I would comment that you've never had certainty because you've never known what 5% of X was going to be. Every year it changes.
And I would just say that we have, you know, part of what has happened here is that we've had a change in leadership in the center. We've had a change in how the program is delivered, and I think that what we're doing is much more vibrant and going to be very worthy for the community, very valued. And I think that is where the difference lies in that as well, is that we are looking to step up the game that has, and not be complacent as perhaps we have in the past.
I heard you say that you would accept the 2 years.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And I think our message regarding the metrics was clear.
Yes, sir.
Both on the individuals and also on the businesses.
Yes.
Was there anything else we were trying to?
So, are you clean with that, Mr. Alfred? Mr. Stanford, you okay with?
Yes, and I want to say, we're not being critical of the program here. We just need some more information.
I understand.
And we're concerned about locking ourselves in, having to deal with that going forward. That's the reason the code was changed. So I think this has come to a rational conclusion.
Right.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to ask Mr. Gruber to rejoin us.
Okay.
Yes, so it looks as if we're looking for a revision here.
Yes,
Mr.
sir.
Gruber. Okay.
So, in terms of a proposed motion that could then move this out of committee onto council, but with several amendments, based upon the feedback that I've heard today, it would be to approve the MOU as currently presented with the following changes. Under the annual report, which is required as the document, we would specifically call out information regarding the number of students who are associated with the center's programming. We would include any feedback from employers that have participated in the Island Ambassador program, and then we would amend it from a 5-year commitment to a 2-year commitment.
That's what I heard. Committee
So
committed?
moved.
Second.
Okay, before we take a vote, I'm gonna ask for any public comment on this particular item. Mr. Hoagland.
This is a perfect example of who we decide to fund and what laws we decide to follow or break. I happen to think that this is very heartfelt and worthy, like David Ames. I think these women did very well in their presentation. I think workforce housing is very heartfelt and worthy. But the laws state we have to get over the laws. Are we going to break the laws or are we going to follow the laws? That's really what it gets down to, and get the laws changed. If you're going to use aid tax money, accommodation tax money, or hospitality money, the use of these funds have specific laws tied to them. And accommodation tax monies says you cannot use accommodation tax monies for anything other than the marketing and promotion of tourism. So if we're going to break laws, I'd rather see workforce housing get the money and these young ladies get the money. And let's just take the money away from Bill Miles in the chamber and his $500,000 salary and his millions. Because Glenn, you just said it's very important that we see where our public monies are going. You just said that, quote. Well, if that's the truth, then why are you being fully educated, not stopping the illegal funding to nonprofits, not just the chamber, but there's other nonprofits. It could be Boys and Girls Club, the Low Country Golf Owners Association. It could be the Heart Association, whatever. The fact is nonprofits need to be funded by their members and their donors. That's not the use of public monies. And in actuality, if you want to follow the law, these folks need to get money from the state, and the workforce housing needs to be private enterprise. That's not government. Government should not be involved in that. But if you're going to break the law, it's kind of like who we're going to elect for office. Well, maybe take your best choice, the best or the worst or whatever. I don't know. But I'd say that if we're going to break the law, let's defund the chamber of their 2 or 3 million, and let's just start giving it to these people right here, because this makes more sense to me than it does to fund the chamber and all these nonprofits. Because we have technology. We don't even need a DMO. The chamber should be nothing but a business league representing its members. A chamber is not supposed to be in business. It's a nonprofit. And actually you're violating, by handing money to the chamber, you're violating 501-C6 nonprofit tax codes. And they're committing tax evasion because the chamber is using our tax monies for their website to sell advertising, to pocket the money, to launder the money, to pay Bill Miles his $600,000 salary. If we had a properly operated chamber as a business league for all of us to join as a member, Bill Miles, he wouldn't even make $50,000 a year. We'd have volunteers and we'd run it like a normal chamber, like under gold standards, like chambers are run all over this country. So y'all need to start respecting professionals, not just me, but other people that stand here at this podium and present to the dais. You need to understand that people know what they're talking about when they come up here. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hoagland. Mr. Gruber, I want to make sure that you captured the motion and Mr. Ames.
I was considering it as a rolling 2 years, so that the affiliated agency would be, in a sense, committing to the next year's plus the next year after that with inflation.
Okay.
So it would allow the university to program for 2 years out each year.
Okay, starting with the FY 25 and 26 fiscal budgets, okay?
Kim, are you good with the making the second?
Can you state the motion completely for me, please?
Thank you.
Can you please, Josh?
We would move to approve the memorandum of understanding with the University of South Carolina, Beaufort as presented with the following amendments. The inclusion of reporting data on the number of students associated with the center's programming and feedback from employers on the benefits of participating in the Island Ambassador Program, and a 2-year rolling commitment beginning with fiscal years 25 and 26.
So moved.
That's the correct restatement of my motion.
And seconded. Any further discussion amongst council? All in favor? Thank you. Moving on. We will now now have consideration of a resolution authorizing memorandum of understanding with the Coastal Community Development Corporation. And we'll back up, Mr. Gruber.
Yes, sir. Let me take this opportunity. We're just going to kind of move through the memorandum here, and then we're going to go through the draft document itself, and then we'll start answering any questions that you have. So again, just to kind of cover some of the background information on this matter, the town was contracted by representatives of the Coastal Community Development Corporation, which is a South Carolina nonprofit corporation. They were requesting funding specifically for the purpose of utilizing it towards the acquisition of various real estate assets on Hilton Head Island that they would then use for purposes of providing affordable workforce housing. In terms of their previous interactions, they made a presentation to this committee back in August, at which point in time they outlined their business model, kind of what their plans were for phase one, how those finances would work, their AMI ranges, and then I believe there was also the policy documents with regards to how they would go about selecting the tenants. All of that information was included in the backup materials for today, just as a reminder of what was previously presented. Following that meeting, staff was asked to do a couple of things. One, we were tasked with continuing to pursue movement on Act 57, which is what will allow the use of state accommodations taxes for workforce housing purposes. That is and continues to be moving forward. The second was to begin preparing a memorandum of understanding that could be brought forward to this committee for discussion that would outline the various roles and responsibilities between the town and the Coastal Community Development Corporation. So staff has done that. We've met with representatives of the CCDC to review this document. They're aware of it. We shared it with members of the committee in advance of this meeting. We did receive some comments from Mr. Stanford. Those comments were included within the draft document. They are shown as underlined items with regards to his particular proposed revisions to the draft document. Trying to find a mouse here. Can you pull up the draft MOU? Or actually, we need to go down below that. I'm sorry. It's the draft MOU, but with a CCDC. Thank you. All right. So in walking through this document, as I indicated, the proposed revisions that were provided by Councilman Stanford are identified with underline. But essentially what it does is it outlines the roles and responsibilities of both parties. So first, it would require the Coastal Community Development Corporation to submit a proposed budget as part of the affiliated agency funding program, presumably for any future year funding requests that may come in. In addition, it specifically identifies how that funding will be used, which is to acquire real property, which could include single and or multifamily workforce housing units within the municipal boundaries of Hilton Head Island. So it is specifically limited to only those units that are in the town's boundaries. It would require that they prepare a maintenance plan to identify how they will provide for the long-term maintenance of those units that are acquired. It will identify how they will go about selecting area median incomes for the available workforce housing units. And then it goes on to talk about that there must be some kind of restrictions put in place to ensure the long-term affordable nature of those units that are required. And then it goes on to talk about annual reporting and transparency, essentially requiring that any funding that's provided to them be tracked and accounted for separately, and then accounting provided to us on an annual basis. You can see that one of Councilman Stanford's requirements was that the financial statements be signed by a certifying officer within the Coastal Community Development Corporation. And then that would be provided to us on an annual basis. And then, of course, they would perform an independent audit review. This language I would highlight is similar to other affiliated agencies that we have. We require similar financial reporting, similar standards in terms of tracking any money that's provided to us. It's a little bit different in that some of the affiliated agencies, we provide this service internally. With this particular one, they would be required to provide that service externally as a separate entity. In addition to receiving Councilman Stanford's comments, there was also a number of questions and comments that had come up that I want to take an opportunity to go over as well. And I've highlighted those within the staff memorandum. So the first question that came in, is there a definition of affiliated agency? There's not a definition of affiliated agency within the memorandum of understanding itself. However, a definition exists by virtue of the fact that the town has created an affiliated agency program that has an application document. And within that document, it lists the 4 criteria that were outlined within the Supreme Court case that outlines how a public purpose is determined for expending public funds. So it doesn't specifically limit it to any specific type of agency or specific function. What it essentially boils down to is that the entity that's receiving the funding is essentially providing a primarily public service on our behalf, but performing it as a public entity. So that's about as best of a definition as we have to provide, but of course there's not specifically one in this document itself, but neither is there in any of other affiliated agency programs. We just require them to go through that application process on an annual basis.
All I was raising in that regard was that as a result of actions which we may take in the next month or two, there may be other agencies that are not on the list that will decide they would like to make an application. I don't know that it has to be part of this process, but it seemed to me it would be desirable on an overall basis to have a framework that defines what this is and helps the public agencies that want to apply know whether they could qualify or not.
Yes, sir. And that was really the essential reason for why the affiliated agency program as it exists today was created, was to ensure that it was not perceived as us just directly dealing with limited numbers of people. It opens up the process to really anybody who thinks that they're going to provide a service, but then requires you to fill out that documentation to show that you can provide us with financial statements. You can provide us with other information that we would need in order to vet your request and determine whether or not it does constitute a truly valid public purpose. Question, do we need to get into the consequences of a tenant exceeding the income limitations, such as by promotion, marriage, or otherwise? For our purposes, I don't believe that we do. We're not a housing agency. We're not monitoring this, but certainly if that's a concern of the committee and a concern of council from a policy standpoint, within the documentation that we would require in terms of how they would go about selecting individuals for tenancy within these units, they could also address those questions about how they would deal with a situation when a tenant who's in a unit would ultimately exceed the income limitations. That was a question that they would have to answer, but if we need to, we can incorporate that into the requirements going forward for any kind of reporting on this matter.
Seems to me, Josh, that the agreement could provide that upon renewal of a lease, that CCDC would confirm that they fall within applicable AMI limits.
Yes, sir. And that's something, and I know a question later on looks at specifically the AMI ranges itself. So assuming once we decide upon what those numbers or figures should be, that would then be the standard upon which any future rentals within this program should be met, at least insofar as rental units that are directly attributable to the funding that we're providing. And that does become a little bit difficult going forward, in that if our money gets used with other funding sources to acquire these funds, which ones are attributable to us, which ones are attributable to others, what standards will those apply to and what they won't apply to? And that's something we will need to flush out as this moves forward.
Money is fungible.
Yes, sir. Another question was, do we want to consider having... Yes, sir.
Let me follow up on that. So if we aren't clear in the MOU, and we have a situation down the road where the town disagrees with the board and the CCDC, who prevails?
At this point, once we've provided the funding and they've used the funding in the manner specified,
Thank you.
our oversight really kind of ceases at that point. The next question that was submitted was, do we want to consider having a representative on their board? Certainly, that's a term that's subject to negotiation. We've done that with other entities such as the Island Recreation Association, who's also an affiliated agency. But then there's also ones that we don't have representation on the board. So that's really kind of a policy decision for the committee and ultimately council if that's something that they believe is necessary if this funding is provided.
What I had in mind was the possibility of a staff member participating with them. So we would have a continual feedback as to how things are going.
If it's just a question of obtaining feedback, we can require reporting, we can require documentation. I would say that if you're going to put somebody on their board, you're putting them on the board for the purposes of helping to influence their policy-making decision in terms of how they're going to operate. That, to me, is probably not a staff member. I don't know if it's an elected official, it may be just another citizen appointee, but somebody with the requisite knowledge and training within those areas that they can make informed decisions and then really participate as a full board member.
Anyone else on that point?
It seems to me that there is something in the nature of a conflict of interest if a member of council is on that board, but the idea of appointing a citizen representative has a lot of appeal.
You have any say on that, Ms. Ames? Okay. Before you leave that, Mr. Gruber, I'm understanding from Mr. Alford that we're looking for an opportunity to get more readily feedback from the board. I'm wondering if the reporting requirements that we have embedded at the moment could be adjusted to satisfy that.
Yes, sir, absolutely. We could require reporting as frequently as necessary, and that could be determined by the board. So whether that be biannual, quarterly, whatnot, we can pick that frequency and request that information from them. And all we need to do is then outline that in the memorandum as far as our expectations.
Not quite at this point, but related. Annual reports can be filed every 3 years.
That's the audit. You have to get, I think it's an external audit is every 3 years. The annual report should just be that. It should be submitted annually. Yes, so it will be that a CPA will do an annual report no less than every third year. Yeah, so Coastal shall prepare and submit an annual report to the town identifying the manner in which any funding that is received by the town was utilized, the outcomes that it is created to support the development of workforce housing, and any performance metrics that may be necessary to evaluate the overall effectiveness that the funding has had in addressing workforce housing. All right, the next question was, should we consider quarterly or other periodic? Well, we just covered that one, so we'll move on to the next. Do agreements with other affiliated agencies have the same type of will consider language? The answer to that is yes and no. So we kind of have a little bit of a grab bag. Some of our memorandums specifically identify funding that will be provided. So you just saw an example of that with USCB. We have the Mitchellville Freedom Park Group. That one has a specific dollar amount that's identified, and so does the Coastal Discovery Museum. So those three have identified funding amounts within the MOU itself. The others state that funding will be provided, but they have to go through the annual budget process, and it is not specific as to the funding amount. It's just to be determined as part of that annual affiliated agency request. Are there other agencies required to have a separate fund in the same reporting language? Yes, that language is consistent throughout. We want to be able to track our dollars. Even though money is fungible, it will get added to other accounts. We need to know how it is ultimately utilized. And that's the information that comes back to us that says, here's the money we gave you, here's the money that was spent, and here's what it was spent on. So it should be specifically traceable in that regard. And then there's an ask for a confirmation that the language complies with the requirements set forth in the Attorney General's opinion letter. Yes, we certainly believe it does, and that language, just so as a reminder, is included on the actual affiliated agency application documents themselves. I would recommend that as this matter moves forward, that for both the Coastal Community Development Corporation and for Habitat for Humanity, that they provide that application funding. Now, we can look at it as part of an out-of-cycle funding request for the FY24 season now, but I think it's still important that they get on that same process as everybody else as an affiliated agency, prepare that paperwork, submit that to us. That way, even though the terms may not change, we at least have the documentation of that. And should anybody question the appropriateness of those expenditures, we can point back to that and use that as justification for why it's clearly demonstrated as a public purpose. And then the last question was the CCDC AMI range should be specific and not using the up to language. Again, what those figures ultimately are is a policy decision for the committee in terms of setting a floor and a ceiling or a specific amount. But that's ultimately, with your direction, we'll take that and make sure that that's incorporated into the MOU accordingly.
Okay. I did want to make one comment on the last bullet point, Mr. Gruber. And when CCDC is presenting, they can obviously address this. But the model really tends to, there's a financial gap, obviously, when it comes to the affordability and the rents, particularly when you start to get below 100% AMI, right? So I think for this particular one, the current MOU doesn't really address it because it just says up to. I think that we're going to need to have some language in there that has that floor and ceiling as you described, okay?
Yes, sir.
All right. Any other comments or questions?
Yes, I agree with what the chairman just said, that we do need to come up with those parameters. And on a broader purpose, I think council should consider establishing what we mean generally by workforce housing or affordable housing, those parameters. I did have a couple of other little comments that I shared earlier. And one was, should we include a provision dealing with the rent should not exceed the 30% applicable income limits as is generally applied?
My understanding is that is built into their program model, but there's certainly nothing wrong with us explicitly stating that as a requirement.
I think it should be in the agreement, yes. And there are provisions in there about sale of units. I'm concerned about a unit being sold that has been funded in whole or in part by the town, then what happens to the money? I would like to see that money reinvested in another unit in a reasonable period of time, not to exceed 1 year after the sale. That would be a suggestion that I would make. So we know that those funds are continuing to recycle through the program, assuming that meets the agreements and needs of CCDC.
Would we be able to put on that any kind of time limit? So for example, if we're 21 years from now and the unit sells, is that something that we still want reported back? Or do we want it for 5 years after we provide funding, just for discussion purposes?
I'm open. I'm
Yep.
open to evaluating that,
Okay.
moving it forward. The town is not going to be an owner of any of these units. If there was a casualty in one of the units, I believe that the town would certainly be included in a lawsuit. People love to sue the town about almost anything. And so we need to make sure there are adequate insurance limits, and I would like for us to consider an indemnification
Yes, sir.
provision from CCDC.
We can certainly include indemnification language.
Those are my comments. Thank you.
Let me piggyback, Josh, on that last comment regarding insurance. The CCDC may be doing renovations and construction work. Does the current language in the MOU cover us for that kind of activity?
It does with the language that Councilman Stanford proposed to be included within the document. So with what's in your packet here, it does require that they provide that insurance. And I think we would add to that just a general indemnification clause that basically says, if there is a lawsuit, you will cover all the expenses. We won't have to have exposure or cost in that because we're not directly involved in managing those. All we're doing is providing the funding.
That's an umbrella statement. Thank you.
Those are my comments, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Mr. Albert, did you have any reactions to Mr. Sanford's comments? Oh, okay. I'm going to give you a bite at the apple also to bring anything else you have. But before we move forward from Mr. Stanford's comments, particularly about the units as they transition, there is language in the CCDC's presentation that talks about covenants. But that language is not in the MOU, so I'm wondering if there's a way to give us some protection in that regard.
Correct. It's spoken to generally, but not specifically. And where that is in there, it talks about that they will be restricted from an affordability standpoint. It could go on to further state the specific covenants and restrictions that are spoken to in the CCDC's materials.
Okay, all right. Mr. Alford? You wait? Yes, we all have general comments. You have anything?
Yes, I do have several general comments. First of all, any part of the town contribution to this, as I understand it, can be used geographically anywhere in a multi-county area.
No. So specifically, this funding, as provided for in section 3A, 2I, it says coastal may only use the above referenced funding for the purpose of acquiring real property and/or acquiring single and/or multifamily workforce housing units within the municipal boundaries of the town of Hilton Head Island.
I'd extend that a little bit to, that doesn't require that the employee who is able to rent this facility either work for a town company.
It does not go to that level in terms of qualifying a person to rent. I think the focus has been more on their salary requirements and the area median income, but there's nothing, at least not in the memorandum of understanding, there's nothing spoken to about where the person is employed.
Personally, I have a preference that that employee be for a business located on the island. I wanted to get into how we're going to pay for this a little bit. Available funds, the impact on ATAX and so on. And the last attachment, attachment 8, has a page, it's page 118, with a lot of calculations on that. Was that done in your office or by Mr. Harriman? Or?
It was done by Mr. Harriman, but I can try to kind of hopefully walk you through this document. And admittedly, this document is a little confusing, and part of the reason for that is we have two combined but yet separate schedules that are influencing this. One is the town's fiscal budget, which is June to July. And so we appropriate funds out of these ATAX funds on that annual fiscal basis. But we also appropriate funds for ATAX grants on a calendar year basis. And so part of what you see here is money that's on hand because we're halfway through the budget year, and part of it is projections for future collections because of that timing issue. What I can tell you is that based upon the current available amounts that we have on hand, what we expect to receive in terms of collections for the next, anticipated tax revenues, that would leave us, and then subtracting out the ATAX grants that council approved at its last meeting, that leaves us a current available balance of just shy of $4 million. And at the last, not the last F&A meeting, but the meeting before that, I had highlighted that a portion of that council had identified for use for land acquisition purposes. And so $2 million of that $4 million is essentially going to be set aside and brought forward as part of a budget amendment for land acquisition, which really leaves us then about a little less than $2 million in terms of an available balance. If you go back to our initial discussions about Act 57, if you'll recall that they put a 15% cap on the collections in terms of what can be spent for workforce housing. There's two ways to go about making that calculation. One is on the whole, and we understand from the Attorney General's opinion that that is an acceptable interpretation. However, our recommendation has been to use the more conservative approach, which is to do 15% of what is left in the balance of the 65% of state accommodations taxes, which puts you right about $1.2 million. So that's why you see that figure listed in this document as well.
Where is the 1.2?
When it says under possible workforce housing.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Now, my interest is in relationship to those recipients of ATAX funds other than the chamber, namely the nonprofits and
Yes, sir.
charities. I believe the figure for the year that we just approved a little while ago was somewhat in excess of $4 million.
Yes, sir. It's this first highlighted line on this page. It was $4,282,328.
So if we were thinking about the possibility that come the 2024, we want to grant 4 million or 4.25 million or something to the nonprofits, is that money likely to be available?
At this point, I think, yes, it would be. Based upon what the trends are that we're seeing now, we're seeing anywhere in the range of about 95 to 96% of last year's collections from an accommodations tax funding level standpoint. So knowing that if we do utilize $2 million for land purchase, and if we do set aside $1.2 million for workforce housing, it would leave us a current available balance of right around $800,000, with the understanding that we're probably going to collect somewhere in the neighborhood of about $6 to $7 million as we go forward into next year.
Is the line 1.2 for possible workforce housing, that figure has a strong resemblance to some requests we've just received?
Well, it's actually based upon the 15% cap more than it is any request that you've received. That is the amount that could be set aside, not the amount that should be set aside.
If we funded CCDC and Habitat for Humanity at requested amounts, which is a hypothetical, what does that leave?
I believe the CCDC's request is for $600,000, and I believe Habitat's initial request was for $500,000. That'd be 1.1 of the 1.2 million that's available.
How does that affect the charities and nonprofits?
At this point, we don't believe it would have an effect on them.
Thank you very much.
Good. Thank you, Mr. Alfred. Everybody else good? Mr. Gruber?
I'm waiting until Al, you know.
I think we're good, Mr. Gruber. Thank you.
Thank you.
Wolf, welcome, sir.
Councilman Brown, thanks for having me. Alan Wolf, representing the Coastal Community Development Corporation. Came in front of the group back in May with a request to town council for a $600,000 grant. I believe the year is almost over. It is the 12th month, so we're happy to be here today to follow up and answer any questions you have. I didn't prepare a presentation because I've presented on 3 occasions to the group, but I am anxious to answer any questions you have. I would like to just give a brief update. You know that we have already purchased 3 units. We are set to close on our next 2 units by the end of this month on December 28th, one of which is on the south end of the island, and it is currently listed on the Airbnb market. So anytime we can get a vacant unit and a short-term rental unit, it's a double win for the community in our eyes. So we're happy to be on the forefront of getting to 5 units. And if we get this grant approved in the next 2 or 3 months, we feel like we would be at 16 units. So our first report back per our MOU would be a very positive one. It could be done very quickly. Probably in 90 days, we can come back and show you the proof, and we can keep working. Last week, the Beaufort County Council made a positive step in supporting a $600,000 grant request that could be used in unincorporated Beaufort County, as opposed to here, which would be, of course, just on Hilton Head, as Mr. Gruber pointed out. So a good step there. And then lastly, thanks to the efforts of a number of council members and the mayor, the South Carolina Housing application for supportive housing program is being filed. It should be in the next 30 days. We're working with a group out of Charleston who is helping us fill out our first application. That would be for 12 units, which would have to satisfy the 50% AMI level. So that is a huge opportunity for us, and Senator Davis has been a huge proponent of opening that door, and we feel like we can be the first successful use of that program here in the Lowcountry. And that's just a starting point with SC Housing, is they have a lot of funds available for housing. So that's just a quick update on where we stand. Happy to answer any questions or touch on anything you all raised.
Thank you, sir. Start with you this time, Mr. Ames.
Alan, thanks for your work.
Yes, sir.
We've answered one question. Acquiring residential units on Hilton Head is in the MOU. That's good. There is something in the MOU that refers to land acquisition and also acquiring real property. Am I confusing the expectations and intent of the CCDC? Are you going to be going into development
That is not the intent with any of these funds. This is to deploy strictly for existing housing already that's in the market.
I think the MOU ought to reflect that. The distributions of AMI levels, we've touched on that already. I think that needs to be understood in the MOU. Is it still the intent of the CCDC to have a 99-year deed restriction?
Yes, I have a copy of the draft covenants for our board meeting coming up after this, drafted by Burr Foreman. And once approved at the board level, we will place those in place on the existing units that we already own.
Thank you. We've talked on the insurance issue. Timing of payments, I would be most comfortable with a drawdown when you have an asset that you've purchased, that you come to the town and.
Could I speak to that for a moment?
Please.
We have worked with a local group who represents a few doctors, one in New York, one in Atlanta. I think I mentioned it in this format before. They own 46 units across the area. They were interested in selling all of them in different marketing blocks. And we've been negotiating with them for as long as we've been standing here in front of the town. We're looking for this grant. So the moment that this grant would be approved, we would be ready to close on 9 units from that doctor group here on Hilton Head Island, which would keep them from going to the short-term market. And I would be absolutely in support of a drawdown in any other circumstance or in any future allocations.
In a sense, that would be a drawdown for all 9 units.
It just will happen quickly.
Rental preferences, there's nothing in the MOU that really speaks to that, whereas in some of your documentation, it suggests that the priority would be for affiliated partners. I'm very uncomfortable with that. And Josh, I would like something in the MOU that says, without preferential treatment to applicants based on their specific employer. I think a general statement would be that this consideration is consistent with prior votes of council. I think it's our responsibility, and it is here today to make this decision, to move it forward.
Okay. I would speak to that. That's been on my mind actually as well. To the extent that an employer were to come to the table with 40% down payment capital, that would qualify them as an affiliate sponsor. No one has to date. But having any municipal funds involved would preclude us from having a preference for an employer based on that, since the money is coming from the town and from the taxpayers, so that would make sense. On the preference side, all of our preferences are documented in our bylaws, they're documented on our website, we can include them in the memorandum, but it would answer Councilman Alfred's comment that there's a local worker preference. So, the first one would be for somebody who has a job on Hilton Head. So the moment we have all those jobs filled by people living there, we wouldn't have that preference. It would then push further out.
Thank you. Those are my questions.
Okay. Stanford?
Thank you. Alan, thank you for your hard work on this, for your whole team. You've been working diligently, trying to meet some of the questions that we've raised, and we appreciate that. I raised a couple of specific items. Do you have any problem with limiting the 30% disposable income limit for rents?
No, in fact, I've worked with town staff. We have a grid that already incorporates those rental rates by unit size and by AMI. So that's absolutely the generally accepted practice, and we would be in support of that because that's how we're
I'd
setting our rents.
like to see that in there as a limitation. on the
As a
rents.
max, I would say, because some of these are.
Right, as a max. And also, some sort of provision dealing with reinvestment of the proceeds of the sale of a unit in other units in a reasonable period of time. Is that acceptable as well?
Absolutely. We hope that people earn out and can purchase these units, and the reuse of those funds would be a win for everyone, including the person who purchased the unit. Yep.
Thank you. Those are my comments. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Alfred? Okay. Just two things, Mr. Wolf.
Yes, sir.
We talked a little bit about the memorandum of understanding, having that up to 120% AMI
Yes.
language. And you obviously have a ratio of different AMIs that you're trying to accomplish so that you can get other benefits, right? So incorporating that into this agreement, you are okay with that as well?
Well, I would say that each one of those restrictions at the state level and the IRS level for the federal safe harbor are up to 50% AMI, up to 80%, and up to 120. So there's always up to language, the idea being the lower the better. So I'm not opposed to leaving it as up to. The max would definitely be 120. And I don't understand the necessity for a floor personally, because it would just mean it's a more affordable unit. So we're open to that dialogue. I don't think it's necessary. I think up to 120% captures everyone's needs in both cases, personally.
I think that the floor is important for us as we're moving forward as far as having discussions about our financial responsibility.
And I would say 0%, Councilman Brown, because, you know, that just makes a unit affordable for someone with a lower household income. So the lower the better, for sure.
Absolutely. Okay, all right. And this is unrelated to the MOU, but you mentioned it, that the potential of pulling down those South Carolina housing funds.
Yes.
Do you have any idea as to how much you're going to be requesting?
From the South Carolina Housing, the supportive housing program would provide up to $300,000 per unit for 12 units, as long as they all serve 50% AMI. And you have to offer supportive housing services of 3 unique varieties, such as mental health awareness, financial literacy training, et cetera. And we would only be able to provide one of those in-house. We'd have to outsource the other 2. So it's already prescribed. It's 12 units up to 300,000, which of course is more than you need to buy units on Hilton Head Island. So we are very excited about that.
Okay. All right, thank you. Yep. Okay, you all good up here? All right, we will ask.
I would just mention, if you want to call me back up to clarify anything that comes up in the next 2 hours, please let me know. Thank you.
Yes, sir. We will now open the floor to public comment on this particular item. Anyone? Yes.
Good afternoon, committee members. My name is Matt Sweeney, and I live in Indigo Run. My comments are going to start with a story about toilet paper. Imagine a time when toilet paper is scarce, and there's a 100-pound house painter who finally managed to find a roll high on a shelf. While he's trying to figure out whether he can reach or afford it, a 200-pound Clemson wide receiver stands behind him, also shopping for toilet paper. Now imagine that this tiger spends every day buying toilet paper for people he decides need it. He has a guy who tells him what stores have it, a trainer to keep him fast, a coach to advise him, help from staff, a coupon for 20% off every roll, and access to express checkout. Odds are 40 to 1 that the football player ends up with the toilet paper and the house painter doesn't. Town council and committees talk about housing subsidies, like grants to nonprofits, as something for the greater good, a de facto solution to perceived shortages of service workers. It's like funding and supporting a football player. End of discussion. But there are always costs to, and therefore victims of, any government action. To date, nobody has told us why the benefits you're aiming for are more important than the benefits other people must do without. I ask that you and the entire town council respect the citizens by providing public explanations for actions that people can understand. With both the CCDC and Habitat funding requests, the greater good is defined by special interest groups, and there is no discussion about who will be harmed. Under the principle of proportionality, interest should be balanced, such that if a policy undermines the interest of one party, it should do so only as far as necessary and must generate a proportionate social gain. Nobody has defined or enumerated the social gains you're aiming for, and nobody has balanced the interest of those who will be harmed. I was very happy earlier to hear you talking about metrics and measuring performance. So to Mr. Stanford's comments earlier, we would like to know the metrics about how society as a whole benefits from the proposed town subsidies and metrics about the losers. The 100-pound painter could have purchased that roll of toilet paper if he weren't shoved aside by the town's football player, otherwise known as an affiliated agency. Thank you.
Thank you. I would ask in the interest of time, because we still have one more agenda item to get to today. If you are in agreement with something that has been said, and it is your time to speak, just say that you agree. And let's hold off on the applauding, because every time we applaud, it takes another 30 seconds as we move forward. So I just appreciate your cooperation in that matter.
Thank you, Council.
Afternoon.
We appreciate your diligence on the specific terms of the MOU, but you are not addressing the viability of the CCDC model that would benefit low-wage earners. Unlike the Office Way project, CCDC proposal will reduce inventories of $200,000 homes that working families can buy on their own, require ongoing government funding, and give CC affiliate partners, currently Surge Group and the Community Foundation of Low Countries, Councilman Ames pointed out, first priorities for their rent-controlled units. It's worth noting that CCDC not only sets qualifications up to 150% of AMI, that's in their presentation, that's equivalent to $170,000, but also with no asset limits. Does that mean someone like Warren Buffett, who takes no income home, will be eligible to benefit from government subsidized housing? I'm further baffled by CCD's capital structure to bend the cost curve. The most expensive capital is equity. The Federal Housing Administration provides mortgages up to 97% of home value. That's how you bend the cost curve. CCDC's model assumes 40% equity or $80,000 down payment for a $200,000 home, which few wage earners can afford. I recognize that CCDC has been actively soliciting charitable investments from individuals. However, these investors will get tax credits and receive a return off and a 3% return on their investments in 10 years, leaving taxpayers to fund their altruistic endeavors. The 99-year affordability model that's often touted by council members may prove to be the most problematic in execution. In 2007, the town appealed affordable housing program primarily because the 30-year affordability term that was too long and qualified buyers have difficulty either secure financing or pay a high down payment. The math is very simple. Mortgages are based on the home value or the future cash flows from rents, which will be theoretically kept low by CCDC. CCDC properties in Hilton Head are already 40 plus years old, and they won't be there for another 99 years. Who will resettle the working families? It sounds like a future Chimney Cove event. Given that the CCDC 99-year model is not economically viable for working families, that the cost-bending structure leaves taxpayers at the bottom of the capital structure, that the AMI violates the framework established by the council, and whatever in the future, as the council already are informed that you would have no say or oversight, we urge you to vote no to the MOU. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Oakland, do you have a comment?
I'm sorry.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else?
I want to go last.
Absolutely. Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry, I was calling on someone else besides you, but that's okay. You just gave me another idea. If you are wanting to speak, please line up.
Perfect.
Come on, please.
Thank you. Dear Councilman, first, let's call this what the CCDC model truly is.
Identify yourself, please.
What?
You identify yourself.
Oh, my name is Megan Fitzpatrick. I live at 24 Ashton Cove in the Point Comfort area.
Thank you.
Of course. Again, first, let's call this what the CCDC model truly is. Low-income housing, not affordable. Just because polling optics show the term low income isn't popular, it doesn't negate the truth. Second, why are we in this mess? Because of many failed federal policies that have crippled this country, with COVID shutdowns, skyrocketing inflation, out-of-control mortgage rates, and a debilitating cost of living. Third, what's the rush? The town council raked the Office Way project over the coals for years. A great project that cost taxpayers absolutely nothing. But here we are, pushing this unproven project along, using taxpayer dollars. Please pump the brakes. Fourth, if this is such a great project that necessitates this rush job, then let the private sector fund it. Let those nonprofits and business owners fund it. If they are the ones with skin in the game. My skin in the game is preserving my property value and my neighborhood. And I don't ask the town for their help, so please don't ask for mine. I live in one of those working-class neighborhoods that are the prime targets for CCDC's low-income housing effort. I fled a state that forced taxpayers to fund feel-good projects. And I spent a tremendous amount of money on my home here. Now you are going to allow a nonprofit with taxes I paid to convert homes that could be viable to working families and permanently depress my home value with 99-year deed restrictions in my neighborhood? Lastly, the government should not be in the landlord business. Leave that to the private sector, especially with a group that just recently emerged with layer upon layer of nonprofit entities where altruistic private investors receive principal repayment with a 3% ROI. If it's such a great project, then they don't get to use my money and financially benefit from it, while I potentially will be negatively impacted. Please pump the brakes and vote no.
Thank you. Next, please.
Hello, thank you for allowing me to speak. My name is Sherry Micret, and I live in Indigo Run. This is just in my opinion. And to me, this whole CCDC project appears to me to look more like a Ponzi scheme than investment. And the reason I'm saying that is that the CCDC will take X number of dollars. They do publish nonprofits online, and you can see a good nonprofit only takes 10%. So we'll say that the CCDC will take the minimum of 10%. Personally, I don't believe that. So that $600,000 would take it down to $594,000. Their parent company, which is the BJHA, there was no data yet online for them, so I don't know how much that they do take out. But we'll say they take only 10%. That takes you down to that same amount of money down to $587,000. Then it goes up to the BJHA parent company, and this is all online, at the CW, and they take a large amount of money. They pay their salaries. Their CEO makes like $148,000. I wish I did. And others in there make $50,000. There was only 2 people who made salaries. Let's not talk about the expenses. So, but that would take it, that was 53% of what their income is. 53% of a charitable nonprofit. That takes it down to $272 from the $600,000. I'm sorry, there's too many layers that's going to make money off of our initial $600,000. Home ownership is the best way to go. They have shown that if we looked at a site where they have where CCDC owns property on Marshland development. If you own that property, your mortgage, your taxes, your insurance, everything would be less than what the CCDC is charging. That is online also, you can look it up. We need to look at the really root cause of why we don't have enough housing for workforce. And it's mainly because we don't have any more long-term rentals on Hilton Head. They took them all away and turned them into short-term rentals. We need to look at how we can reverse that. A good one way was if you rent long-term, you pay less in your taxes. Short-term rentals, you have to pay more. You need to look at a way to get our island back into doing long-term rentals. There's other organizations as the Sea Pines Resort and Hilton Head Health. They themselves bought money without using taxpayer money. Thank you for allowing me to speak.
Thank you.
Afternoon, Councilman. Thank you for your time. My name is Matt Stock. I'm in full support of the town entering into MOUs with Habitat and CCDC and immediately granting the $600,000 request from CCDC and the $500,000 from Habitat to provide workforce housing. The town should not become a landlord to achieve the workforce housing strategic plan goals to supply the North Point Development Group in a strategic partnership with the developer. That approach does not provide short and medium-term solutions for our housing problem. Both the Habitat and the CCDC proposals allow the town immediate response at minimal risk and will begin to safeguard our Hilton Head Island workforce housing. CCDC's plan to purchase existing apartments and lease them to Hilton Head workers is the only way to provide homes without any delay. CCDC's model is the only immediate solution for workers being displaced and also provides options for adding new workers. This does not require any new development, no new roads, no sewer connections, no building plans, nor permits. The same goes for Habitat as a well-proven short-term path to homeownership. I'm interested in short-term displacement plans. Instead of reading, prepared this stuff and I've done my research, I think there's a human element that's getting missed in a lot of these discussions. So I want to talk about myself from a personal level here and maybe go into a more macro view. I've been an Islander for 15 years. I work in the hospitality industry. I'm a bartender. I'm a journalist. I'm an activist. I work with several community organizations and charities. I've organized and hosted charity events that have raised hundreds of thousands of dollars for Islanders, mostly children. I'm an entertainer. I spend a lot of the month of December every year portraying Santa Claus at events where I see a lot of you people that are in this room right now. I don't consider myself an undesirable or a low-income housing candidate, yet in the last 3 years I've found myself, by definition of the term, homeless, without being able to find long-term renting. I'm more financially successful and secure than I've ever been in my entire life or career. And the numbers are not something I'm going to specify, but it should be enough for me to find long-term renting housing on this island. We're not talking about just undesirables here. We're not talking about low-income housing. I think it's a fair tactic, and I don't think it's an accurate portrayal of the kind of people that are looking for housing here. We're looking at a mental health crisis amongst good people that want to stay on this island and love this community, that are starting to not love it anymore, that could contribute very much, and spend most of their time in fear of their long-term rental being sold, them being given a 30, 60-day notice. People are being displaced constantly, sleeping on couches, finding bedrooms to stay in. Sure, they have a home, technically, as I did for a while. Fortunately, I haven't fixed my situation, but that's a great fear, and I think it should be addressed. We need immediate solutions. Thank you for your time, guys.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Bonnie Canova, and I live in Long Cove, and I just want to talk just a short minute today on the CCDC project. Today, you will consider a memorandum of understanding between the town of Hilton Head and CCDC for the town to provide annual funding to CCDC through the affiliated agency's funding process for workforce housing. We urge you to vote no to the MOU. First of all, CCDC only organized in May 2023 as a 501c3 entity, has no viable business model or demonstrate operating records in developing and managing workforce housing. By obtaining the affiliated agency status, it will benefit from town council support and a fast-track permit processing, in addition to and continued funding from taxpayers. But the CCDC has yet to determine the basic qualifications of AMI. In the MOU, it says up to 120% of AMI, applicable to Hilton Head in the CCDC presentation. It tied 150% AMI. So which one are you voting on today? In addition, the CCDC workforce housing model involves many layers of nonprofit entities, each taking a cut from the county or the municipality grants for administrative and management fees. As an example, the $600,000 county grant will be administered by the Buford Jasper Housing Trust Fund, a 501c3 entity, which will be managed by Community Works, another 501c3 based in Greenville. The CCDC also received $100,000 from the Community Foundation of the Lowcountry, a 501c3 that has received millions of dollars from the town of Hilton Head, not to mention that one of CCD's board members sits on the Buford Jasper Housing Trust Fund, 2 on the Community Foundation of the Lowcountry. By some estimate, more than 35% of the government funding will be siphoned out by the nonprofit before it goes into developing workforce housing. Last but not least, according to the MOU, in the event that CCD no longer exists, the town will assume the liabilities and responsibilities for CCDC's housing unit. We don't want our tax dollars to be spent in the landlord business. So please vote no to the MOU today. Thank you.
Hi, thank you. Ashley Phillips, live in Indigo Run. Please vote no to the MOU between the town of Hilton Head and the CCDC. Our tax dollars should not be used for a not-for-profit organization. The CCDC request of $600,000 will not be a one-time ask. They are asking for a yearly contribution. Also, the CCDC is asking for the town to provide support staff as well as special treatment by expediting permits needed for the development and/or renovation of residential units that it acquires or maintains. If this endeavor fails, we lose our money and the town becomes a real estate management company, which will require more departments and more employees, which means even more tax dollars needed. The CCDC also states that the rental of any workforce housing unit shall not exceed 120% of AMI for Hilton Head. That figure works out to be an income of approximately $150,000. Please explain to me how that type of income would be qualified for rent-controlled housing. The current town workforce housing framework has the AMI at 60 to 80%. The Office Way project is an indicator that the private sector can come up with some innovative solutions to help with the workforce housing shortage. If the CCDC has private donors who have already pledged large sums of money towards purchasing lower price homes on Hilton Head Island, why don't these investors just buy the properties outright and rent them themselves to long-term renters instead of using our tax dollars? In closing, I want to be clear. I'm not against finding solutions to help with our workforce housing issues. I'm against using my tax dollars to do so. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thanks for allowing me to speak today. My name is Lee Lucier. I'm CEO of the Richardson Group and an Island resident. As you know, the Richardson Group has recently created Islander housing, worker housing, and most recently, medical housing. This was done through housing conversion of commercial space to housing, and all with private funding. Housing does work with private funding, without public assistance or jeopardizing the LMO or island character. This has been proven, but with a very limited ROI. But with this, some of our housing models have been attacked as a bad solution or the wrong path for the island, as has the CCDC and Habitat for Humanity have been criticized also. I'm here to say that all reasonable models of Islander housing which support the needed inventory and securing of additional long-term rental options are necessary. Private funding isn't always the correct financial answer, nor the only answer. And all feasible housing models need to be pursued by the town to combat this housing epidemic. This process will be part of the program to find our housing success on Hilton Head Island. Therefore, I am in full support of the town entering into the MOU with both CCDC and Habitat for Humanity and their funding in January to add to workforce housing solutions. The town's current district planning effort demonstrates commitment to a significant growth management strategy. But with this, there have been too many questions about how much new or large-scale development is too much for our island. The future placement of new development is the key to the island's infrastructure and the Islander way of life. The CCDC plan is the only current proposal that doesn't add any new construction and/or land use to our island. This plan does not require any additional square footage to be constructed. The Habitat model is the proven path for new Islander home ownership with minimal development on the island, and again, keeping within island character and our LMO. These two partnership proposals, in conjunction with longer-term partnerships like North Point and private developer initiatives, are all needed to make meaningful change to our workforce housing problem. I urge you to vote in favor of both MOUs today and to recommend funding for both CCDC and Habitat for Humanity.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm John Smarsley from Hilton Head Plantation. I'm here to ask you to vote no on a memorandum of understanding with the Coastal Community Development Corporation. All of us in this room believe we have a need to look at the workforce housing issue. We all believe that one solution is not the answer. Also, you are aware of your fiscal responsibilities to this town to provide a clear due diligence on all financial matters. You have received in-depth data regarding our opposition to this MOU. I do not wish to rehash the information. The facts are the facts. Simply ask yourself, does the CCDC show any proof of concept to warrant gifting a startup for years to come? We have only seen potential, not verified results. Has this idea been done in other communities? Who does it truly help? Someone making over $100,000 a year? I know many of the CCD board members are longtime friends with ties to the council and ties to many of the future GIC altruistic investors. But you can see past this Ponzi-like scheme, which uses town funds to seed and feed their return on investment. They will only pledge funding until the town's gift is guaranteed. I know you see past the cost curve bending principle that leaves the taxpayer holding the bag. I know you look past the desperate cries with no substance to throw money at the workforce housing issue. You understand government is process and decisions done in haste are folly. Lastly, the staff ambiguity related to this MOU shows that this should not have been considered. These serious open-ended questions need to be scrutinized. All have considerable financial and legal repercussions. The focus of this committee should be to discern answers to those questions, not quickly moving along a document, throwing away money for years to come. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello. We've heard enough details from many people. Eric Somerville, resident, and I'm just going to be short and to the point. I'm for this program as long as it doesn't take town funding. I'm against this program if it takes town funding. I'm less against it if it takes county funding. I'm less against it if it takes state funding. I'm not against it at all if it takes federal government funding. The American Rescue Plan is a good plan. I think it's excessive spending for the feds, but everybody's got their hand out. We should take some of that money and do something good with it. We need low-cost rentals on this island, or we'll have low availability to workers. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, council members. My name is Susan Wersbicki. I live at 50 Purple Martin Lane on the island. It's going to be very quick and short. I concur and stand with John Smarsley, Megan Fitzpatrick, and others that want you to vote no on the memorandum. Thank you for your time.
Good afternoon, Lynn Fontaine, excuse me, HHP. I'd like to say that I support CCDC's model as a purely private initiative. A nonprofit that utilizes solely private investments and donations to subsidize housing for workers is great. But in my opinion, it is not an appropriate use of taxpayer dollars. I oppose a grant from the town, and I oppose the status of an affiliated agency for CCDC for several reasons. I'll address just one. Neither the town government nor CCDC should pick winners and losers. And only two parties into their quest, and CCDC has already demonstrated that it does not adhere to the selection criteria it set for itself. About 55% of households on Hilton Head have income below the town's AMI. There's no transparent and fair way that CCDC can pick a handful of winners from those 9,000 households. I'm not concerned about that when they're using private money. But when tax dollars are at stake, transparency and accountability are required, but not feasible. In CCDC's own video, they demonstrated that they did not adhere to the criteria they set for themselves. They present a single woman who moved to the area a year and a half ago, works as a paralegal for a law firm on HHI.
She was living in a studio apartment in Bluffton until CCDC selected her as a winner to rent a below-market rate apartment on HHI. This young lady's aspiration is to move away from the area to go to law school. This subsidized renter does not work for an affiliate partner of CCDC, or if she does, that could be a conflict if government money is involved. She was not involuntarily displaced, and she did not reside on Hilton Head Island. She moved here a year and a half ago, and in her own words, she moved from a studio in Bluffton that cost $1,600 a month to an apartment on Hilton Head Island that costs $1,600 per month. So what is the benefit to the residents of Hilton Head Island? I do not want taxpayer dollars involved in choosing winners or losers, particularly when a startup organization isn't even meeting their own priority criteria. I'm asking that you vote no on the CCDC proposal. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Susan Giarusso. I live in Palmetto Dunes. I'm not as familiar with the CCDC and what you're looking to accomplish as a lot of my friends are today. But what I did hear today by sitting through the meeting is that there are a lot of questions. You all had questions to the organization about metrics and other things to monitor. I'm also a small government type of person. I find that to vote yes for this is premature. I agree with what Megan said about pumping the brakes, and there's no rush. Let's do this right. Let's not get on the hook town taxpayers for this. I'll say it's a worthy goal, but it's not. We're not in the business of being a housing authority. So pump the brakes, get your questions answered, and vote no on the MOU at this point. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Carol Auger. I live at the Cypress, 99 Birdsong Way. And I want to tell you I'm an advocate for affordable housing and specifically for workforce housing. I've been involved in one of the first projects in New Jersey that was successfully not only developed but also maintained for 30 some odd years. I chaired the Bedminster Hills Housing Corporation that administered this particular housing, and there were almost 800 and some odd affordable units. I'm concerned today, and I will admit I've not read the memorandum of understanding or done anything other than come and listen. And I have concerns. I have particular concerns about the so-called affordability and who's going to be allowed to purchase or rent these facilities. And I think Hilton Head would be better served by examining that further and talking to people who have had specific housing experience. I really believe that you're selling the residents and yourselves short. I think it could be done in a better way. And I would ask you to vote no, because I think you should study it more. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. Thank you very much for your service. Thank you very much for the opportunity of allowing all of us to come to say something today. I didn't come to this council meeting, to speak today. I came chasing the lawyer that I needed help with something regarding housing for my grandchildren. My name is Thomas C. Bonwell, Jr. I came to Hilton Head in 1935. I still live here. I live out in the woods off Katie Miller Drive, to be specific. I am happy to say that I'm standing here because I don't believe some of the folks here in this room today realize that the statistics last year, I believe, indicated that 54,400 cars per day come across the bridge, or the bridges, plural, from the mainland to Hilton Head per day. Now, some comes for vacation during the summer. The majority of them come to provide professional service to those of us that live on Hilton Head Island, South Carolina. Whether it's teachers, healthcare workers, landscapers, people that work in the hospitality industry, and many others. I am happy to say that I happen to be one of those persons that did serve on the Housing Committee many years ago when the RUDAT report was written. And many years ago, the town council decided to get rid of that Housing Committee. I am happy to say that as I stand here, I need to say again, please support the effort. Please support the effort. I get say 3 times. Please support the effort positively, whatever it takes to get housing for working people on Hilton Head Island. Thank you.
I hope I'm last. Nobody else, I hope. 3 hurdles. It's all about the law. It's not about worthy or heartfelt. Let me repeat that. It's all about the law, not worthy or heartfelt. The town breaks the law, the town gets sued. It's as simple as that. Just like you got sued for the $600,000 you gave to Sea Pines Plantation for the dredging of Harbor Town that the public does not have access to in a private gated community. I want that money paid back to the taxpayers, and that lawsuit is going on, and we need to win that lawsuit. Using aid tax funds, accommodation tax funds, hospitality funds, it's against the law unless the law is changed. Violation of state constitutional law, using public monies for private purposes that does not benefit the public good, reason, and use of all taxpayer funds, it's illegal. Tax money has a purpose. You can't just use it for anything you want. You can't just pick and choose who you're going to give money to. It's got to be under the law. I saw no added provision with the terms and conditions or contract to conduct a totally independent audit of all these monies. That would be annually, and a forensic audit every 3 years. And also, since tax funds are being used, every one of us in this room gets to FOIA the use of those monies. Freedom of Information Act. Taxpayers have a right to see where their money is going. And we don't have FOIA compliance. We need to see a drafted contract with the terms and conditions, the name of the lawyer and the name of the law firm, and it doesn't need to be our town lawyers, I can tell you that. And how do we trust accounting or anything, or contracts without controls and transparency and accountability? We can't trust anything we hear from anybody. So let me ask the lawyers, Stanford and Gruber and Coltrane, let me ask them a question. If we're going to trust all this, then why did you develop a 5-year, multi-million-dollar contract with our hired DMO that was fraudulent, had no audit provisions, and in fact, the head of the DMO stated to all of you, his use of millions of our tax funds is his secret sauce, and it's none of anybody's business to see where and how he spends and uses millions of our tax money. Is this what we're faced with when every time we see something, we're not going to get the accounting of this money? Lawyer Stafford, is this what you mean when you say you want to assure that the public money is used properly and legally? You're a lawyer. You're from Atlanta. I know all about you. I've seen, and I'm from Atlanta.
Thank you.
So you know, when a lawyer speaks for Atlanta, and I assume you're an intelligent man, or you
Your
would
time's
be a
up.
lawyer in Atlanta.
Your time's up, Mr. Over. Thank you for your comments. Anyone else? Okay, we will bring it back to the dais. Mr. Gruber, Mr. Wolf, are there any additional comments that you want to provide, sir? Good, okay.
Just wanted to take a very brief moment to outline the proposed use of funding for this purpose would be from accommodations taxes. And so we're working under the requirements of Act 57 of 2023, which is what authorized the expenditure of those funds for this particular purpose. And within that are some requirements that we are still working through and that we have to ultimately complete before we can authorize the use of those funds. What I would like to do is, knowing the comments that we've heard today, they're a little bit more nuanced than what they were with University of South Carolina. USCBs were pretty straightforward, and I think we all understood them. These, I want to make sure that we get the language right, and so what I'd like to do is work on providing some amendments to the draft MOU, bring it back to you at your next meeting, which, given timing, would still be before the next town council meeting, would allow you to still move this out on the same schedule if you were inclined to do that today. And so just wanted to kind of bring that forward as a suggestion that if we bring this back at the next meeting, I can have that information better outlined within the document based upon the feedback we heard today.
Okay, and can you state when the next FNA meeting is, Mr. Gruber? The date of the next FNA meeting?
January 9th.
Thank you. Okay. Yes.
I think that's a reasonable, come back to this one.
Josh, are you able to summarize those points that you're going to be working on?
Mm-hmm. We're going to be adding provision with regards to indemnification from the CCDC to the town. We're going to add language which would further restrict the covenants to be clear in terms of their usage. We're going to add language to require that the individuals selected for this have active employment on the island, not off the island. We're going to amend the MOU to remove the development language and just make it purely the acquisition of existing properties on Hilton Head. We will amend the language to remove the preference in selecting CCDC affiliated entities, and that would be based just solely upon AMI and documented employment experience. We're going to add language regarding the reinvestment of proceeds from the sale of any units in the program within a fixed period of time. And then we're going to look at, I believe Councilman Brown, you indicated that we do need a floor. So what I would propose is a range of 30% to 120% AMI.
I want further clarification on the issue of rental preference, that issue. I think it's important for the public to know that a high-ranking criteria will not be a affiliated partner of the, now, how you word that in the MOU is the opposite without, so I want that to be clear because I get very uncomfortable with the potential perception of conflict.
Sure. And I think the way that that would ultimately work is anybody who meets those minimum criteria, so the income requirements of the range, the employment requirements of having active employment on the island, is qualified. How they go about selecting it then needs to be on some kind of neutral criteria, but without regards to preference of employment. Would that be an accurate statement?
But here's the situation that I asked earlier in the day. Who prevails if it's not in the MOU?
Yes, sir. And that's why we need to put it in the MOU.
Thank you.
And that's primarily why I want to take a stab at drafting it to bring it back and make sure that we've got it accurately stated before we move it on.
Thank you.
Alfred.
Following up on your answers to Mr. Ames' question, there were several issues that were raised that you replied that this is a matter of policy for the council to decide, and I think some of them, we didn't say anything. And I assume that they're not in the list that you read.
The only one that is the floor and the ceiling in terms of the AMI. I went ahead and inserted 30% to 120% for consistency purposes, because I believe those are the same numbers that we have in other documents. But you are correct. That is a figure for you to purely determine.
If there are any issues that you said are up to council policymaking that you haven't already specified, I would like to see choices.
Okay.
Focus council's attention on the policy issue.
What I will try to do is develop a list of policy-specific questions that we can identify as part of our discussion at the next meeting.
Thank you.
Stafford.
Thank you. I want to say I appreciate the heartfelt comments that I've heard from many citizens today on both sides of this question. We have been learning more and more every day about the crisis of workforce housing on this island. We need to continue to attack these problems and do the best we can to solve these problems. South Carolina law was recently amended to specifically allow the use of ATAX funds for workforce housing. We are following the dictates of that law, and I will support this. Finally, I want to say to the citizens here, this is not the final decision. This is just a hearing before Finance and Administrative Committee, which can or may not remove this forward to the full council who will make the decision. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so Mr. Gruber, I'm focusing on timing at this point.
Yes, sir.
Based on the comments that I've heard from the dais, you need more time to provide us language that we are comfortable with based on the discussion today. And January 9th is our next FNA
yes, sir.
meeting, and the council meeting after that would be when?
The council meeting after that is January, I believe, 23rd. 16th, thank you. January 16th.
Okay, all right. I bring that to our attention because the whole reason that we are here having this discussion is because this was pushed down from the entire council to be figured out, right? And I think we're really close to having it to a point where we can send it back up. So I would just ask you, Mr. Gruber, if you used the word nuanced, I think, as far as the language that you have to create.
Yes, sir.
If you feel as if this committee will need more than that meeting, then I would ask that you poll this committee for a special meeting in advance of January 9th so we can get this back to council in a timely manner.
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you. Any further discussion here? We're good? Thank you, sir. All right, we'll move on. Well, excuse me. We will take a brief recess before we move on.
Second.
I'd like to call this meeting back to order. Thank you. Okay, Mr. Gruber, our next item of business is resolution authorizing MOU with Habitat for Humanity.
Yes, sir. So again, to start with kind of by way of background, Hilton Head Regional Habitat for Humanity applied during this past year's affiliated agency funding cycle, requesting $500,000 in funding to be used towards the acquisition of land that would then be used to develop workforce housing units. At the time, council did not provide funding as part of that request, primarily because at that point, Act 57 had not been finalized, nor had been signed into law. So since that time, that's now come together, and that brings us kind of to where we are today, where staff was asked to develop a memorandum of understanding that would outline the various roles and responsibilities for the parties if the town were inclined to provide funding as had been requested under that affiliated agency funding cycle. We provided this document in advance to council members. The one comment that I did hear that I included in the memorandum to highlight is that the agreement should have language that eliminates the possibility of short-term rentals. A couple of things that I want to address with regards to that point. One, in the actual draft MOU itself, under section 3A VI, it does indicate that additionally within the submitted plans, any units created under this agreement shall be restricted from being used for short-term rental purposes. So that language is in the draft document as it exists. But in addition to that, I also spoke with Ms. Dooley and the way that the financing works for the units that Habitat creates, because they build the units, but then the people who occupy them do take out a mortgage on those properties, but those mortgages are tightly controlled. And within those documents is language that prohibits what would essentially be short-term rentals. It essentially requires it to be used for owner-occupied purposes. So that concern is covered kind of from 2 points. One, within the agreement itself, and then also by way of the practice that Habitat goes about providing that financing. Just to kind of, again, identify kind of at a high level what the terms of the proposed MOU call for. The use of the funding would be restricted for the purposes of acquiring real property and or designing and constructing single-family, multifamily workforce housing units within the municipal boundaries of Hilton Head Island. So it is contained on island within the municipal boundaries. It does not create any kind of shortcuts. They would need to go through the permitting and review process as would any other person who would be coming forward. But as we would with any other individual, staff will work with them to try to expedite that process to the extent that we can and make sure that we give them all relevant feedback that would allow them to move forward. Again, as part of their business plan, they have to provide information outlining how the workforce using housing units would be developed and how they would be maintained in accordance with generally accepted maintenance standards. And then also identify how the applicants are screened, which, given the nature of their program, is already understood and known how they go about qualifying individuals. And I'm sure Ms. Dooley can provide you some more information on that. Again, we had language that said that the AMI cannot exceed 120%. If we want to keep these two agreements similar, we can also set the same language in terms of setting a floor and a ceiling. Again, it's up to the direction of the committee and council in terms of what we set in that agreement. But I don't think that either one would be in conflict with the programming that Habitat currently provides. In terms of the ongoing affordable nature, that does go back to the financing documents that Habitat provides. Within there is the ability for somebody to sell their unit, but for a period of time, the ability to sell it and what they can sell that for remains restricted, so that the affordable nature of that unit does remain in place for a certain period of time.
You know how long?
I believe it's 30 years, because it's within the mortgage document, correct?
It depends on, the term of the mortgage, which is individually.
Okay.
Thank you.
And then again, the same accounting, reporting, transparency requirements. They have to provide financial statements. They have to be able to track and report. They have to provide an annual independent audit. And that it has to be done by a CPA every third year, and that they would also then submit an annual report identifying the manner in which the funding was received, how it was utilized, the outcomes that it created, and the impacts that it's had on the issue of workforce housing development on the island. We've got the insurance requirement. We would support Habitat in providing staff that could help them with design and permitting questions, again, to expedite that process. And then I think the remainder of it is pretty straightforward. So I'll be happy to answer any questions that the committee may have.
Stafford?
I'd like to request, as I did in the previous one, that the occupants of these houses be employed within, on the island.
Anything else, sir? No? Ms. Baines? Good?
No, I wanted to go down a few things. Does the insurance language mimic what we talked about in the other presentation? Indemnification or not?
It does not have indemnification language. I think we could add that in there, but it does provide for insurance, basically covering all activities that would be involved in acquiring or constructing the homes. Once the homes have been transferred, there is not that same requirement because at that point, they're individually owned.
I have a question on the limited land that we have on the island. And I think I've expressed this before. The model that we have seen on the island is single family on decent sized lots. I have a concern that with the limited amount of land that we have on the island, we ought to be pushing Habitat to build a different kind of model that is more responds to the fact that we don't have a lot of land. So I don't know if duplexes or some statement about taking advantage of the density that's allowed, I'm not sure, but I want to make sure that when we're investing this money, we're getting as much rooftops as possible.
It sounds like what you're looking for is specificity with regards to a project itself. So land and then what would go on that land in terms of the number of units.
Yeah, but my expectation, maybe the council's expectation is that the MOU is expecting a certain kind of approach.
Okay. If we know what that is or what the standards are, so for example, you mentioned townhome.
We'll see what.
Yeah, that's it. If we know what that is, we can incorporate that language into the agreement.
Okay. We're being asked for $500,000. Is there a drawdown schedule in the MOU?
No, sir. Essentially, we would provide that funding, but then they have to provide us with financial reporting showing how it was utilized.
But if they buy one piece of ground for $200,000, we haven't turned over the 500.
It's not specified, and certainly that's the way we could structure it is
my preference.
Based upon a reimbursement basis. Okay.
We are suggesting an AMI in the MOU document. I don't have a problem with that, but I just wondered, I would think that Habitat has that in their information, and I don't know if we're going to put it in, I would say duplicate what they already have.
Okay.
Duration of affordability. Going back again, we're an island with a limited amount of land. Is 30 years the right number for us as a community? I'm concerned about that. When Cordillo apartments were built 45, 50 years ago, we didn't anticipate where we'd be today. Now we don't have that asset. And so I think we really have to be thinking long-term. So that's a conversation probably with Habitat, but I would be stretching the MOU as far as possible so that we have this kind of capability on the island. And those are my comments.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Stanford.
Thank you. The 30-year affordability is a question because a homeowner could qualify within the affordability limits and then be successful in their employment and start to make more money in excess. They would own the house.
Mm-hmm.
We lose that control. Whereas if we're dealing with rental properties, we're able to maintain the control. I applaud the work of Habitat on this island and around the country and around the world. But I'm concerned about our dollars going out and not continuing on a long-term basis to be able to support our goals, and that is to provide affordable workforce housing. I think that that's just something I'm going to have to accept, but that's a concern that I've mentioned. I've raised a concern about the fact that it is a home ownership model and that for all practical purposes, our dollars would only be available at the instance of purchase or construction of the home. Whereas in the case of a rental property, it is recycled, so to speak. We talked about that, what happens if a sale occurs. But I was struck by one of our citizens speaking that he believed that we should use all affordable tools in order to solve this problem. And so I think I'm ready to move this forward, but those are concerns that I have felt I needed to express. Thank you.
Any reactions to, well, colleagues have brought conversation?
Or probably just needs conversations with Habitat to understand what flexibility might be there. But if the town is saying we need to protect our affordable assets on the island going forward, then maybe there's something in this MOU that says the town has the option of purchasing or somehow retaining the affordability at some point. I don't know. I don't have the answer to that one, but I think we've got to structure this to the community's benefit, not just a single organization.
Kind of suggested a way that there may be an option provision. Somebody who has fortunate enough to acquire title to one of these homes decides themselves to sell the property. Option or back into the workforce housing.
I just think we ought to explore that.
I think that's a good idea. But again, we need to make sure that it works within the Habitat model.
And with the permission of the chair, I'd go ahead and invite Ms. Dooley to come up because I think she'd probably be in the best position to speak to some of these matters. Keep dropping that same sheet.
Can you pull my PowerPoint, Josh?
Thank you.
Afternoon.
Good afternoon. We're still in afternoon, right? Yes. Thank you so much for giving us this opportunity to come before you and talk about Habitat. Always a pleasure to do that. And hopefully we can get some of your questions answered today. I think this is a puzzle piece that you've seen me present before. It kind of oversimplifies our program, but those are the 4 things that we need to be able to make this program work. Volunteers and donors we are very blessed with. Families are standing in line to get into our program and be a part of our program. When we hold informational meetings, there are always many more families looking for homes than we can help at that current time that we're adding. Land is our challenge right now, and so that's why we have come before you a few times to talk about acquisition of land. You all know the challenges that we have here in the island. I won't go through those, but Habitat has solutions and proven solutions. We have a track record. We've done it here on the island. We've built 35 homes for families here on the island. The best example of that are the 32 homes that we built over in the Glen, just off of Marshland. We've talked about AMI. Our program is set for 30 to 80% of AMI, and that 80% limit is set by international. So for us to go over that, we can do it in special circumstances, but as a rule, our maximum limit is 80%.
Let me just add a personal comment. I think we should adopt what you have used.
I would be fine with that.
Serves the purposes of the community better.
I agree.
Brenda, if you don't mind, we will probably interrupt you as you're moving forward.
That's okay.
As you touch on the points that have been brought by my colleagues, okay? So that checks off the EMI discussion, Mr. Gruber.
As far as density, we've been going by what we were told was our options for density. So we've had an architect who looked at lots with us, and if we had an acre lot that was pretty squared off, a perfect shaped lot, and there weren't trees that we can't take down. There are all kinds of things that we have to consider when looking at a lot, but we could build 8 to 10 single-family units on an acre of land. We can do better than that if we do look at duplexes or quads or triplexes, and we're willing to do that.
My concern is that the habitat model requires a certain competency or limit cap of competency in construction. Is there a problem with creating 2-story houses, duplexes, different configurations? Can a townhouse development be?
Absolutely, we would be willing to look at that.
I think the more flexibility we have in solving island problems, the better off we are.
Sure. And we can do that, and we have talked with the town about doing that, so that's definitely an option.
Before you move on for that point, Brenda, the MOU specifically speaks to this being a true partnership, as I read it, okay? And it has a section there that talks about the lending of town sort of expertise when it comes to the planning department. How do you see that working to sort of satisfy what Mr. Ames is getting at? Because as we look at this particular slide where we say 8 to 10 units on an acre of land, to me that's sort of suggesting that we're looking at our current LMO standards, where we are in the moment looking to improve our standards, okay? But at the same time, we know we need to establish a set of affordable housing on Hilton Head, okay? So I'm just curious to know how you see that relationship working to sort of satisfy the return on investment here.
I think with the two of us being able to work together, we can come up with the best possible solution of what's possible. We're at a point right now with our affiliate where we're looking to be creative and looking to find options that work to get that best bang for your buck, if you will. So having the town's guidance on what we can actually do and then coming up with that creativity of what we can do would make a huge difference.
Okay. Want to respond, Mr. Nick?
I had another issue that I wanted to bring up,
Sure,
and that is, we mentioned the concept of drawdown, meaning when you have identified a property and you need the money, you would apply to the town for that, versus a blanket, not a gift, an award of the $600,000. Do you have any objections to that drawdown concept?
No, the idea is having something there so that when an opportunity comes up, we can go to that quickly.
Understood.
Whereas we don't miss that opportunity.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right. And as we've talked about, the homeowners pay a mortgage to us. A mortgage payment is made to Habitat. Those mortgage funds coming in, we put back into building more housing. So they're paying it forward, in essence, with their mortgage payments to us. Our payments right now, again, they're based on an individual family's income, so that family is not paying more than 30% of their household income for housing. That includes their principal payment back to us, as well as their insurance and their taxes and their termite. So we're looking at each one on an individual basis. As I said, we have a model that works. It's been working for a long time. We've served 35 families here on Hilton Head, building homes for families who are working here, who are living here, whose kids are going to school here, they're shopping here, and they're vibrant members of this community. I think most of you probably understand the basics of how we work. We select our families. They go through an intensive competitive application process. We're looking at them pretty much the way a bank would, only we're not quite as strict as a bank would be. So we're serving those families that can't get a traditional mortgage through a bank or a mortgage company. Once they come into our program, they start earning those 300 to 400 hours of sweat equity. We're also educating them and helping them to become successful homeowners. That's our goal, is for them to be successful homeowners. So we've got classes on budgeting and credit and predatory lending, and a reminder that we're not your landlord. We're not providing those property management services for you. You own this home. You have to maintain this home, and you need to budget for those maintenance issues as they come up. So we talk a lot about those kinds of things. And then once they go through, they have an affordable mortgage that they can afford to pay. And they have that second mortgage that builds in that affordability period. And along that line, I can also add, we are now looking to work with the Low Country Council of Governments on getting HUD funding. So with that also comes a 20-year restricted covenant that the house has to remain affordable for that period also. And then just a little bit about the leadership of our organization and who all is involved in helping us make these decisions. And then prizes to the first person who can read through this with all that's on it. But our goal here was just to let you know that we are here, we have been here, we're very engaged in this community, we are going to be here in this community, and just some of the accomplishments over the past year that we've had. We're here today asking you to approve or recommend the MOU for us to move forward and keep us working in this community.
Brenda, excuse me.
Yes, please.
Go back a couple of slides. I just want to make the one with the townhouses.
Okay, backspace doesn't do it, Josh. How do I get back?
Kim's helping us.
Good.
One more. No, two more. That next one. That's it. All right. So let's say that in my head, that townhouse configuration makes sense on a specific lot. Is there something in your head that says that's not a good product for our people? And then secondly, is that a product that can be easily built by volunteers?
There's nothing in my head that says we can't do this. There will be some modifications, I guess, that we have to make for volunteers, because most of them have already told me I'm not getting up there on that second story. And for most of them, I don't want them up there on that second story. So we would look at having to hire out labor to do that.
I had a scaffolding collapse on me when I was doing a Habitat house. I think there is risk in your model.
So yeah, at that point, we would look at hiring out that part of the work. Agreed. My construction manager is here.
If I could jump in just one second.
Yes, go ahead,
I want
Josh.
to focus on, within the draft MOU that's in there, we've anticipated a number of these comments, both Councilman Ames and Councilman Brown. So what we've included is language where we've identified that staff would essentially work directly with Habitat to look at what are those alternative designs that we can come up with, and what is the right zoning on the property need to be, what do those development standards need to be to allow that to happen. So if the MOU moves forward, that is something that's inherent within it, is that we would work with them directly to develop those.
But in my head, I'm trying to establish whether or not a higher density product is viable, so that we can, in investing $500,000 on the island, we can get more units than the model that we have seen.
Yes, sir. And because this would be reimbursement based, we could work with them on developing what that could look like and then bring it back as part of an actual drawdown on the funding approval.
So it doesn't have to be in the MOU.
Correct. Well, I would say it's already in the MOU in terms of anticipating that. That's exactly what we're going to do in terms of helping to look at all of those different aspects and developing what is the best product that we can bring forward as part of this MOU.
I probably have a personal issue because of my, anyway, but we can move ahead.
Other questions?
Is it true that Habitat is now an off-island organization?
I'm sorry, say that again?
Did Habitat expand its service area?
Yes, so we have merged with the Low Country Habitat affiliate in Beaufort. So we now serve all of Beaufort County and all of Jasper County.
Okay, if we were to give you, grant you $500,000, how many houses do you think you have the capacity to build in a 12-month period?
I would say we could do, it just depends on, there's so many variables that play into that as far as if you're just looking at it from start, we're ready to start building, we're ready to go vertical.
No, it's when concrete for the slab can be poured or whatever you're doing.
Yeah, it takes us about 4 to 5 months to build a house. If they're all in one location, we can have 3 or 4 of them going at a time. If they're in multiple locations, then that's a different answer.
And how many acres in your mind were you contemplating could be bought for $500,000?
What we've been looking at, the acres that we've looked at were anywhere from $300,000 to $500,000.
An acre?
An acre.
Okay, so maximum 500,000, 1 acre, 4, 5, 6, 7 houses. So a year and a half or something to, okay, got it.
Yes.
And one last question. The townhouse model is a model that your clients would accept.
We are talking about that now with a project we have in Hardyville, and that hasn't seemed to be a problem. The only time it's been a problem for a family is if they were concerned about stairs, if they physically.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Brenda.
Nothing further, thank you.
Okay, thank you. I just had a few things that I wanted to add here. I think Councilman Alfred may have brought up the question about Hilton Head workers. Is that currently within your qualifying criteria?
That would be a policy change for us, I guess, that our board would have to consider. And a conversation, as Councilman Ames mentioned, that we would need to have to work through that. For me, rentals are a little different than home ownership. So, I would want to talk through that with all of you and with our board.
What would you contemplate that somebody would, own a house on Hilton Head but work in Bluffton? Is that what you're?
It was Councilman Anderson's comment, so I was just bringing it to your attention because we did not get a response from you on it. So, was that your concern, Mr. Alfred?
Yes. Okay. And I would reinforce that concern because really what we're trying to do with affordability, in my head, what we're trying to do, part of it is to make the island available for younger people to grow with the island. So I think that if somebody works here, that person is integrating into the business world as well as the social world. So I think it would be a priority from my standpoint, whether it's the rest of the council's standpoint, to have that be a part of the criteria.
Okay.
Understanding that it is a board decision that you will have to make.
Yes.
As I also understand that you have recently adjusted your AMI range through board policy discussion, correct?
Yes,
Yeah,
so the 30 to 80%.
I just bring that point because it's obviously it is a concern that should be considered. And I guess just clarity on the 2 mortgages. Can you explain how that gives the protection of the asset remaining in the affordability range?
So when we finish a home, we do an appraisal on that home. We sell the home to the home buyer at basically what it cost us to build it, the things that we paid for, the materials, the labor that we paid for it, essentially. So they have a first mortgage, that's what they're going to repay to us over the 25 to 30 years based on their income. The second mortgage represents that difference between the fair market or the appraisal and the first mortgage. Okay. That one will go away over time, whatever the first, roughly what the first mortgage is, that one is prorated and goes away over time. As long as they stay in the home, it's their primary residence, they're making their payments, they haven't refinanced in any way, that second one will go away over time.
So basically, in a 30-year term, you only have paid on one mortgage. And when I am ready to sell at that point, what happens as far as the reuse of the funds?
So if they sell before they come to the end of their term, they repay both of those mortgages,
Right.
whatever the balance is.
But at the end of the term?
At the end of the term, the home is theirs.
Right.
Just like anybody else, they can sell that home.
Okay, and if they sell that at that point, market rate, correct? There's no reuse of the balance, so to speak, the equity that they've earned over time, right?
No.
They earn that, correct?
Right, that's theirs.
Okay.
We've used the mortgage payments that they made during that 30-year term to go back into the program and help other families.
Got it. I bring that because, as we have been talking about, how quickly 30 years goes by nowadays, that, some of these neighborhoods that are currently affordable could, in a sense, turn into something different down the road, okay? That's just a risk that is involved in this as we are moving forward.
And again, as part of this MOU conversation, that can be something that our board would have a conversation about.
I think it's important for your board to understand that we're trying to solve two problems here. One is to provide affordable housing. Secondly, to provide housing for workers on the island.
Of course.
And so I hope that we can come to some sort of understanding dealing with that. I realize that's a variation off of your typical model, but that's what we need to do with the dollars that are entrusted to us.
Absolutely.
Right, thank you.
Understood.
So Brenda, I just want to go back quickly to the opportunity of doing something outside of just a single-family traditional unit, right? And you mentioned that as the example of 2 stories, I'm not saying that that is what we need or not, but if you are going 2 stories, you now have to have additional labor costs that you would not currently have, correct? So that, in a sense, will create an additional gap of affordability based on your model.
There may be other ways for savings, however, that we could make that not that much more.
So I just think that that's part of the discussion that we need to understand as you're moving forward. There's a cost to doing business, and we want to maintain this affordability. I think your quest for grant is obviously appropriate, but as we're having this discussion around the return on the investment, I think we need to all understand sort of the tug and pull as to when you will need more money to do different things, right? So, okay, all right. So there's a couple, I guess, outstanding questions here that you, from what I'm hearing, are willing to go back to your board to discuss, right? So I'm gonna lean on my colleagues here. Will we want to ask Ms. Dooley to go back to her board and then have this also on our next F&A meeting?
I think so, because this has been a healthy discussion. It's brought out some issues. We realize you can't answer them yet, and so we can have further discussions on this.
Fair enough?
Fair enough.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Gruber,
Yes, sir.
have you captured everything? We're good?
So let me repeat it back. That way we got it locked down. All right. So we're going to include the indemnification language similar to what we discussed with the CCDC, a requirement that applicants be employed on Hilton Head Island. Add language specifies that the funding is going to be provided on a reimbursement basis. We're going to use Habitat's AMI language of 30% to 80%. And presumably they're going to talk with the board about potential program discussions that will allow us to evaluate a return on investment and try to maximize that to the extent that they're willing to allow it.
We also discussed the right of first refusal in the event of sale.
Yes, sir. Include an option for right of first refusal. And again, that would have to be a programming discussion, I believe, with their board as well, because that's not, I don't believe that's something that's currently included within. Okay.
You can assign it.
I didn't hear that.
Said that they have first right of refusal at the moment through their policy, okay? All right.
Which if they have right of first refusal, would that satisfy our concern, or would we need to have right of first refusal?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Josh, the AMI is something that we decided, but Councilman Brown brought up an interesting point, that if the economics of the different model increase costs, maybe that Habitat comes to us and say, we got to go to 80% or, whatever the number.
Yes, sir.
So, yeah, the MOU doesn't restrict that. They can,
No.
if both parties want to change something, they can.
Currently, what's in the MOU is language that allows it to be up to 120%. But I think what I've heard from council is it'd be better to align it with what their program requirements are. But if there's changes, ours needs to mirror theirs.
Well, both parties would agree to that, presumably.
Yes, sir.
You good?
I'm good.
Okay, public comment on this topic.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, thank you. My name's Tom DeMint. I've been in the commercial real estate business for 40 years and been a permanent resident on the island for 25 years. I've had the pleasure over the last 3 years to be on Habitat's board and see firsthand the pride and sense of community that comes with ownership. And nobody's really said it in terms of economics, but in terms of the Glen, the 35 existing homes we had, for comparison, our average mortgage payment with taxes and insurance on our homes is $500 a month. That's probably less than half of what you can rent most places for. So we're providing the economics and the pride of ownership, and I think we're a really good model to help fulfill the need we have for workforce housing on the island. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Ajax Castellanos. I want to thank this committee for taking the time to hear us out. And I really want to thank the town for, I know they're putting a lot of effort into doing affordable housing. I am one of the 35 people that had the blessing of buying my house through Habitat for Humanity. And boy, standing here, hearing all these things, I'm really going to go home today and really thank God for that opportunity, because I can understand how hard it is to get funding for this thing. So thank you, Habitat. But I want to tell this committee that, I know we're trying to solve a problem of affordable housing, and that's exactly what Habitat allowed me. Not only it changed my life, but it's changing my whole family's life. And I understand you guys are concerned about your long-term investment, and I can see now, and I can share with my son the opportunity that we had and how much impact my son is going to have in this community in the future. I know that now for sure. So I would really recommend you guys to move this MOU forward. It really makes a difference. What more standing investment can it be than when you invest in a family like mine? Why I now have 3 children. I was able to allow my wife to stay home because that was her desire, to raise her children, to make it better citizens in this life. So I really want to thank you guys and for the opportunity, and thank you, Habitat.
Thank you. Anyone else?
My name's Jeff Bush, and I am the Development Director for Habitat. And I just wanted to share a couple of quick things. As a Development Director, I get to meet so many of our donors and listen to what they hope to accomplish with their funds. And when talking to donors on Hilton Head and in Bluffton, I'm always questioning, when are you going to be back on Hilton Head building again? And I have one major donor who wants to lead the campaign for a women's build house specifically, but she wants to build it specifically on Hilton Head and have her colleagues and her friends out there with the hammers and nails building the home. On Hilton Head, we right now have about 1,000 households or businesses that are donors. We have 800 in the Bluffton area that are also active donors. These constituents would love to see us back building on the island again. But we also have to be good stewards of their donations, and land purchases and infrastructure enhancements right now are done in areas where land is cheaper. However, once we do have land, we have a large group of supporters behind us who will help us fund the construction of homes and a great core of volunteers to build the homes. Furthermore, to keep our costs low, we have relationships with Ward Edwards, Home Depot, Graco, and many other businesses who provide services at a reduced cost. This MOU is a great opportunity for both the town of Hilton Head and for Habitat for Humanity of the Low Country. As we've proven with our development at the Glen, once given the opportunity, we can not only serve working class families looking for affordable homes, but be a partner with the town of Hilton Head to create more workforce housing. Thank you.
Anyone else? Please.
Hi, everybody. Heather Rath for the record. Thanks for this discussion on the Habitat MOU. If y'all remember, the charge came out of this committee when the request was made for $500,000 back in March for the affiliated agency process to enter into an MOU. I, on behalf of Habitat, along with Brenda, along with staff members, Josh has been great to work with and Orlando has been great, have moved us to this point. I had a prepared speech today talking about moving forward the MOU, and I would encourage you all to move it forward today. I do want to digress from that speech, though, and talk a little bit about Councilman Alfred's comments and Councilman Ames' comments, because I want to make sure that we are all aware of the discussion that we're having when we say that we want people working in our community to be in Habitat homes. I think that what we do as Habitat is we provide housing, and we can absolutely look at a first right of refusal for workers to enter into our program, but then we allow them to carry their mortgage and be free. And that might mean getting a better job. That might mean matriculating to something else that is not necessarily Hilton Head based, but that doesn't mean that they're not going to spend money here, have their kids enrolled in school here, pay property taxes here, and so on and so forth. So I don't want to constrict what could be future dreams and capitalism, based off of we want people that just work here and are, doing the widgets on a day-to-day basis. Also, Councilman Ames, I share in your dream to have young people move to the island. I moved here when I was 23 years old, and my husband and I have made a great life here. However, with Habitat and with the way that we vet our folks that come into the program, you're seeing a little bit more established people that work in healthcare, that work in hospitality. So while that might be something that you're looking for, it's something that may not fit our niche. We are happy to partner with you and to try and find a way to meet that niche, but I just want to make sure that we're all setting the right expectations for moving forward. I hope my comments made sense today. I appreciate you all, and I hope that we can move this forward with some funding. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yes.
I'm a newbie here listening to this committee, but I see some correlation, but Susan Giarrusso, Palmetto Dunes. I see some correlation between the prior discussion on CCDC and here, and some of the questions you raised were about, your stewardship and using our money. And I would just say, and I saw a lot of the same comments you're going to try to build into this MOU. So I would say I wouldn't be an advocate of moving it forward now. You talked about, since you're going to do it for the other group, why not making those adjustments, revisit it when you're going to do it with that group, and so you're comfortable with both of these groups, looking to address a real concern on the island, which we all do know we need workers here. So I'm not in favor of moving this forward at this point, because I heard some questions that you guys all had that are similar to what was addressed on the CCDC.
Thank you. Any further comments? Thank you. Okay, moving it back to the dais. Any more discussion on this topic? I wanted to make just sort of a blanket statement here, okay? So, Mr. Gruber, I know that we have some revisions to be made outside of the discussion that Habitat will have to have with their board, correct? Would you describe those as being of nuance, as you mentioned earlier, or are those more easily to make?
I
I think it's the latter, at least for the ones that I've outlined here today. Now, again, if they go talk to the board, that may change, but for the other ones that we've looked at, they're more straightforward.
Okay, perfect. So just sort of going on something that Councilman Stanford said earlier, which he was agreeing with one of our constituents, and that we have to tackle this affordable housing crisis from all types of angles, okay? And being that we have had success with Habitat on Hilton Head already, different time, okay, but regardless, success. And the fact that Habitat did approach us almost a year ago now, okay, it'll be March before we know it, that's why the grade keeps coming so quickly. I would ask that the portion that you can handle, all right, we go ahead and move that forward at our next scheduled meeting, or if you're looking to meet with us beforehand, because of the nuance of the others, we add this to that agenda as well, okay? In the meantime, that gives them time to sort of talk with their board and get back to you on that.
Yes, sir.
That make sense? Does that?
It does. I think that we should get some sort of timing from Habitat about when they would have a meeting and when they expect that they might have a response to some of these questions back to us. And then based upon that timing, we need to schedule, I think, a special meeting to deal with both of these programs.
Fair enough? Ms. Dooley? Yes? Okay, all right, good, thank you. Job well done. So it is 4:15. And this committee is not known for having long meetings, but nevertheless, very important discussions today. So we thank everybody for their attentiveness. And too bad that most of the crowd has gone, but I do want to take this time to make sure that we wish everyone a very safe and happy holiday. Be blessed, be mindful of those that are less fortunate than us, and appreciate and love on your family through these times. With that, we are adjourned.